Welcome back to Potter Read. Today's adventure. Harry spoke to the Hogwarts wards at age 6 and they crowned him the castle's true heir. Before we dive in, if you're new here, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Now let's begin. Chapter 1, The Cupboard and the Cornerstone. The cupboard under the stairs was 4 feet by 3, and Harry Potter had measured it himself twice because the first measurement had felt too much like a guess, and Harry did not like guesses. He had used a strip of cardboard torn from a cereal box, marked it against his own foot, then against the door, then against the wood at the back where the slope of the staircase came down to meet the floor. The numbers had agreed the second time. When numbers agreed, you could lean on them. When they did not, somebody had made a mistake, and at number 4, Privet Drive, the somebody was always Harry. He was 6. He knew he was 6 because Aunt Petunia had said last winter that a boy of nearly 6 ought to be able to peel potatoes without leaving half the potato on the peel, and because the calendar in the kitchen had a square for everyone's birthday except his. Dudley's square was ringed in red felt tip. Uncle Vernon's was underlined. Aunt Petunia's had a little drawn flower. Harry's birthday, the 31st of July, was blank, the way a window is blank when nobody has bothered to look out of it. This did not bother him in the way that the family seemed to expect it to bother him. It interested him. A blank square was information. It told him that he had a birthday and that nobody intended to mark it, and those two facts pointed in different directions. And where two facts pointed in different directions, there was usually something underneath that nobody was saying out loud. Harry was very good at noticing the things nobody said out loud. It was, as far as he could tell, the main thing he was good at, and a person had to be good at something. The cupboard smelled of dust and of the rubber soles of old shoes, and faintly, under everything, of the floor polish Aunt Petunia used on the hall. Harry had decided that the floor polish smell was the best of the three. He thought about it sometimes on the nights when sleep would not come, the way you might think about a friend. "Up," said Aunt Petunia's voice through the slats of the cupboard door and rapped twice sharp with a knuckle. "Up, up, I want the eggs going before Dudley's down, and don't let them stick." "Yes, Aunt Petunia." He pushed the blanket off. There was a particular order to mornings, and Harry had learned that the order mattered more than the work. If you did the work in the wrong order, you were in the way, and being in the way was worse than any amount of work. So first the eggs, then the bacon laid in the cold pan so it rendered slow the way Uncle Vernon liked it, then the toast watched the whole time because the toaster ran hot on the left and Aunt Petunia would not have it replaced. Harry had explained the toaster to her once, the hot on the left of it, and she had looked at him for a long moment with her mouth gone thin, and after that the toaster had stayed exactly as it was. He had learned something from that, though it had taken him a while to put words around it. The lesson was that some problems were not allowed to be solved by him, and that the not allowing had nothing to do with whether the solution was correct. The kitchen was bright and yellow and clean. Harry liked the kitchen for the first 10 minutes of any day before anyone else came down, when it was just him and the spitting fat and the square of gray English morning in the window over the sink. He cracked the eggs one-handed against the rim of the bowl, a trick he had taught himself by ruining a great many eggs in secret and burying the shells deep in the bin under the potato peeling so that nobody would count. Down the hall the stairs began to thunder. That was Dudley. Dudley did not walk downstairs, he fell down them on purpose, one heavy foot after another, and the house took it without complaint because the house belonged to him. "Is it ready?" Dudley said, arriving. He was a wide pink boy with a head like a thumb, and at 6 he was already most of a head taller than Harry and a good deal more than that across. "I want 4 pieces of bacon, not 3, Mummy said." Mummy did not say, Harry said, because it was true, and then watched it land wrong on Dudley's face and understood in the same instant that being true had been the mistake. "Mum," Dudley bellowed with the easy power of a thing that has never once been told no. "Mum, he's being clever again." Aunt Petunia came in fast, drying her hands. She looked at Harry the way you look at a stain you cannot place. "What did I tell you about that mouth?" she said. It was not a question. None of the things she said to Harry were questions. 4 pieces, and then you'll do the front beds, the whole row, and I don't want to see your face till they're done. So Harry did the front beds. This was no hardship. The front beds were at the far end of the garden, past the hydrangeas, in the corner where the fence of number 4 met the fence of number 6, and the two of them made a kind of small private nowhere that the windows of the house could not quite see into. Harry had discovered the nowhere a year ago and had never told anyone, because a thing nobody knows about is the only kind of thing that is truly yours, and Harry owned almost nothing. He knelt in the cold dirt and pulled the small weeds that grew up between Aunt Petunia's begonias, and while his hands worked his mind went where it liked to go, which was sideways and downward into the questions. The largest question was the one about him, the one with the blank calendar square at the bottom of it. There were things that happened around Harry that did not happen around other people. He had catalogued them privately and with great care, as he catalogued everything, because a thing you have counted is a thing you can begin to understand. Item, his hair grew back. Aunt Petunia had cut it nearly to the scalp once in a temper, leaving only the front to hide the thin scar over his eyebrow that she hated to look at, and by the next morning it had all grown back exactly as it had been, as if the scissors had never touched him. Aunt Petunia had not mentioned it. Aunt Petunia's whole method of dealing with the world was not mentioning things, and Harry had come to understand that the harder she worked at not mentioning a thing, the more important the thing was. Item, when Dudley's gang had cornered him behind the bins in March, and Harry had wanted very badly to be anywhere else, he had found himself sitting on the kitchen roof with no memory of climbing. Uncle Vernon had shouted at him about the roof for an hour. Uncle Vernon had not asked how he had got up there, which Harry thought was a strange thing for a frightened man not to ask, unless he already knew the answer and was frightened of the answer most of all. Item, a teacher's wig had turned blue. A pane of glass had vanished at the zoo, except Harry had not been to a zoo. That was a different boy in a story he had half dreamed, and he set it aside as not data. The pattern in the real items was clear enough that even a 6-year-old could see it, and Harry was not only 6, he was 6 and paying attention. The strange things happened when he felt something all the way down to the bottom of himself, fear mostly, wanting sometimes. The cut hair had grown back the night he had cried about it under the blanket where no one could hear, and the crying had been the kind that went all the way down. So the strangeness lived at the bottom of him, below the part that did sums and noticed toasters, and it answered to feeling the way a dog answers to a whistle. He did not have a word for the strangeness. The Dursleys had a word for it. He had heard Uncle Vernon use it once late, through the floor, in the voice men use for words they think are too dirty to say at full volume. The word was magic, and Uncle Vernon had said it the way another man might say cancer. Harry pulled a weed, shook the dirt from its roots, and laid it on the pile. The afternoon went gray and then grayer. Somewhere over the fence a lawnmower started and started again. He was nearly to the end of the row, his knees soaked through and aching, when he heard the gate. It was not Aunt Petunia's gate, the front one. It was the side gate, the low one by the bins, and the only people who used the side gate were Dudley and Dudley's friends, because the side gate let you into the garden without passing a single window, and Dudley had learned young that the things you do where no window can see you are the things you are allowed to keep doing. "There he is," said Piers Polkiss, who was small and ratty and laughed before things were funny. "Down the end, doing the flowers like a girl." "Get him round the back," Dudley said, "where Mum can't see." There were 4 of them. Harry counted without deciding to. Dudley, Piers, and the 2 big quiet ones, Malcolm and Gordon, who never said anything and did whatever Dudley pointed at. 4 was too many. 4 was the number at which running stopped being a plan and started being a way of choosing which one caught you. Harry stood up anyway, because kneeling was worse, because a thing that is standing has at least decided to be a thing. "What do you want?" he said, not a question either. He had learned that from them. "Harry hunting," Piers said happily. "It's Harry hunting season." They came at him through the begonias, trampling the row he had spent 2 hours weeding, and some cold practical part of Harry's mind noted that he would be blamed for the begonias too, that this was the genius of it, that whatever they did to him would arrive at his own door wearing his own name. Went left toward the small private nowhere in the corner, because the corner had a gap under the fence that he was thin enough to take and Dudley was not, and for 3 running steps the plan was a good plan. Then Gordon got a fistful of his collar from behind and the plan ended. The corner closed around him. Fence on 2 sides, the cold brick of the shed on the 3rd, and the 4 of them filling the 4th, and the gray sky shut over the top of it like a lid on a pot. Dudley's fist came up. Harry had time to think, with the strange floating clarity that came at the bottom of bad moments, that he did not want to be here, that he wanted it the way you want air when you have been underwater too long, that he wanted out of his skin and out of the corner and out of the whole flat gray world of Privet Drive where his birthday was a blank square and his name was the name they hung their crimes on. He wanted it all the way down, and the bottom of him answered. It had never answered like this before. Before, the strangeness had been a small thing, a flinch in the world, a wig gone blue, a boy on a roof. This was not small. Something opened underneath him the way a trapdoor opens, except the trapdoor went down past the dirt and past the cold London clay, and past anything a garden in Surrey had any business sitting on top of, down to a place where the ground was not ground at all, but a single vast humming line of light strung taut across the whole of the country like the lowest string of an instrument too big to see. Harry's wanting ran out of him and found the line and ran along it. Dudley's fist did not land. The corner of Privet Drive let go of Harry the way a hand lets go of a held breath, and the gray lid of the sky tore open, not into more sky but into stone, and Harry Potter fell up. The garden was gone. He came down or up or sideways onto a floor that rang very faintly under him, a single clear note like a struck bell heard through a wall. He was on his hands and knees on cold flags the color of slate, and when he lifted his head the first thing he understood was that he had never in his life imagined a space this large, because his life had been 4 feet by 3. A hall went up around him into dark. The walls were stone, dressed stone, fitted so close that he could not have slid the cardboard from his cereal box between the blocks, and they rose and rose past balconies and arches and the black mouths of doorways until they reached a ceiling that was not a ceiling. Where the roof should have been there was instead a kind of high vault made all of moving light, threads of it, thousands, 10,000s, crossing and recrossing in a pattern so dense and so deliberate that Harry's noticing mind seized on it and could not let go. It was the pattern of the great humming line he had fallen along, except here it was not one line, it was all the lines, the whole instrument, woven into a roof over his head and turning slowly the way the inside of a clock turns when you take the back off, and every thread of it carried light the way the line had carried his wanting. The light was gray gold and very old. That was the only way Harry could have said it. It was old the way the smell of the floor polish was old the way a thing is old that was already old before anyone alive was born. He got to his feet. His knees were still wet with garden dirt, and the dirt was the realest thing about him, the one piece of privet drive that had come along, and he held on to the fact of it the way you hold a rail in the dark. "Hello," he said. The word went out into the hall and did not come back. There was no echo. A space that large ought to have an echo, and the absence of one told Harry that the hall was not empty in the way that empty rooms are empty. Something was here that drank the echo. Something was here that was listening. He felt it before it spoke. The feeling was the same one he got in the half-second before Aunt Petunia opened the cupboard door, the certainty that attention had turned toward him, except this attention was not small and human and tired. It came from the walls and the floor and the woven roof all at once, from everywhere the way warmth comes from a fire that fills a whole room, and it was so large that Harry's first true thought inside it was not a brave thought at all but a child's thought, simple and total. It was the thought that he was very small and that the thing looking at him was not. Then it spoke, and the sound of it was the reason there had been no echo, because the hall had been holding its breath to make room. Who walks? It was not one voice. Harry's ears tried to make it one voice and failed. It was four voices laid so close on one another that they had become a single chord, a man's and a woman's and a man's and a woman's, deep and bright and grave and warm, and under the chord a fifth thing that was not a voice at all but the hum of the great woven line, the floor note, the bell behind the wall. The words did not come through the air. They came up through the soles of his feet, through his wet knees, through the small bones of his chest, so that he did not so much hear them as become briefly the place where they happened. Harry's whole body wanted to run. There was nowhere to run to. He had learned in the corner by the shed that when there is nowhere to run the only thing left is to be a thing that has decided to be a thing, and so he stayed standing and he answered as he answered everything with the truth, because the truth was the only tool he had ever been allowed to keep. "Harry," he said. His voice came out smaller than he wanted and he let it. "Harry Potter, I think I fell. I didn't mean to come in. I don't know where this is." The attention sharpened. He felt it the way you feel a lamp turn to point at your face, except the lamp was looking, not shining, and what it looked at was not his face. "Potter," the cord said, and the word turned over slowly in the air, the way a hand turns over a coin to read the other side. "We know the name. The name is written. The name is old in U.S. "Written where?" Harry said, because a thing that is written is a thing that can be checked, and a question was the only direction he knew how to move. A sound came from the hall then that took Harry a moment to understand, because he had not expected the vast old thing to be capable of it. It was something very like a laugh, not a cruel laugh, the laugh of someone watching a small creature do the one brave thing available to it. The light in the woven roof brightened by a degree, a single degree, the way a banked fire brightens when a door is opened somewhere and a draught reaches it. "In the stone," said the cord, "in the line." "In the blood that came to the stone Anne did not take. Child, do you know what place you stand in?" "No," Harry said. "You stand in the first hall," said the voices, "beneath the school that is not yet yours to see. We are the ward, we are the binding, the four laid down and the binding that outlived them. We have kept this house 1,000 years and more, and in 1,000 years no child has come down the line to stand where you are standing." The hall, Harry thought, the school. Turned the words over the way the cord had turned over his name. He did not know the word ward, not the way they meant it, but he could feel the shape of the meaning under it, as he could feel the shape of magic under Uncle Vernon's disgust. A ward was a guard, a binding was a thing tied shut. He stood then in something's guard, in the guard of a school he had never heard of that had kept a house for 1,000 years, and it was telling him that no one had ever come as he had come. "How did I come?" he asked. It seemed the most useful question. If he knew how he had come, he might know how to go back, and somewhere far above and far away there was a corner by a shed where a fist had been about to land, and a body that was his, and he did not entirely trust that the body would be looked after while he was gone. The cord seemed to consider him. He had the sense, standing there, of being weighed, not judged, weighed, the way Aunt Petunia weighed flour, level and exact and without mercy and also without malice. "There is a thread," said the ward, "and the thread is love." The word fell into the hall and the woven roof turned a half-degree to mark it, every line of light leaning the smallest measure toward the place where Harry stood, so that for one moment the whole vast pattern was a flower and Harry was the center of it. "A woman died, and in her dying she tied a knot no knife has cut. The knot is anchored in a house of brick far from here, and the house of brick is anchored in U.S., for he who tied the first end of it tied the other end to our old stone, thinking we would not notice. We notice everything that touches the stone. Tonight you pushed child, and the knot sang, and you came up the thread into the heart of us like a drop of blood coming home along a vein. Harry stood very still inside all of it. He understood perhaps half. He understood the most important half, which was this: a woman had died, and her dying had made a knot, and the knot had something to do with him, and the knot was the reason he was here. He had never had a mother that he could remember. There was only a green light at the very bottom of his memory, below even the strangeness, a light and a high cold laugh that was not his mother's, and he had learned long ago not to go down to look at it. The woman, Harry said, and his voice did a thing he did not give it permission to do. It went thin in the middle, and he had to start the word again. The woman who died, was that my mum? The ward did not answer the question, which Harry understood even then to be an answer. We do not keep the dead, said the cord, and for the first time the four voices in it came a little apart, so that he could almost hear them separately. The grave man and the bright woman and the deep man and the warm woman, four people who had been alive once and were now this. We keep the living and the walls that hold them. But the thread you came on was her work, and her work is good work, and it has brought you to a door that has been shut so long that those who hold the keys above have forgotten the door exists. Which door? Harry said. Ours. The light in the roof changed. It was not a brightening this time. It was a focusing, all the threads drawing their light down out of the high dark and into the air of the hall, until the woven pattern had emptied the ceiling and poured itself into a single shape that hung before Harry at the height of his own eyes. The shape was a coat of arms. He knew the word coat of arms because Uncle Vernon had one on a tie, a stupid one, company tie. This was not stupid. It was a shield quartered into four, and in each quarter an animal made of moving light, a lion that turned its head, an eagle that opened and closed one wing, a badger low and patient, a serpent coiling and uncoiling without hurry. Around the four ran a band of words Harry could not read, in letters that were not quite letters, and the band turned slowly, and where the four quarters met in the center there was a fifth thing, a single point of gray gold light that pulsed soft, 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 like something asleep that was beginning very slowly to wake. Look well, said the ward, and Harry looked. He had spent his whole short life looking well. It was, he had decided in the garden, the main thing he was good at. He looked at the four animals and saw that they were not decorations, they were doors, each one away into something, and he looked at the band of unreadable words and understood without reading them that they were a promise and a condition and a price all at once, the way the Dursleys' rules were all three at once. And he looked at the gray gold point at the center, the sleeping, waking thing, and the longer he looked at it, the more strongly he felt that it was looking back, and that it had been waiting not for 1,000 years in general, but for him in particular, for a boy with garden dirt on his knees who answered large, terrible questions with small, true words. He did not have the language for what he felt. He was 6. The only large word he owned for the feeling was a borrowed one, and it was the word the ward had given him, and he tried it in his own mouth, silently, the way you try a key. Home. The point of light pulsed once harder. It had heard. Child, said the cord, and now there was something new under it, an attention so total that the whole hall had tilted toward him, every block of dressed stone, every black doorway, the wet on his own knees. We have a question. It is the oldest question we keep. The four who made us left it in our mouth for the one who would come, and we have held it 1,000 years, and tonight, for the first time, there is someone standing in the first hall to hear it. Will you hear it? Every part of Harry that had survived 6 years at number 4 told him to say no. The things that wanted to ask you questions were the things that wanted to catch you out. Aunt Petunia's questions were traps. Uncle Vernon's questions were the front rooms of his rages. Even the teacher's questions had a way of becoming, later, the reason you were in trouble. A question was a door that the asker had already walked through, and was holding open behind them so you would follow into a room of their choosing. But this question had been waiting 1,000 years, and it had been left by people who were dead now and woven into a roof, and it had come to him along a thread that a woman had made out of her own dying. And Harry Potter, who owned almost nothing, who had a blank square for a birthday in a cupboard 4 feet by 3, found that he wanted, all the way down, to know what the question was. Wanting, he had learned tonight, was the thing the bottom of him answered to. Yes, he said, I'll hear it. The hall went still in a way that even the held breath before had not been still. When you come to a house that is not yours, said the ward very slowly, each word a separate stone laid down, and the house is old and rich, and its masters are gone, and no one living would know what you took. Do you come to take, or do you come to keep? The words settled. 4 animals on the floating shield went still in their quarters. The lion and the eagle and the badger and the serpent, and the gray gold point at the center held its pulse, and the whole vast woven intelligence of the place poured its attention down onto one small dirty boy and waited to hear what he would say. Harry thought about it. That was the thing the ward could not have known to expect, and it was the thing that decided everything, though Harry would not learn that for a long time. He did not answer fast. He had learned in the kitchen with the bacon that fast, true answers were the ones that got you hit. He stood in the first hall with his wet knees, and he turned the question over as he turned everything over, looking for the trick in it, and he could not find a trick, which was itself a strange and enormous fact, because in all his life no question had ever been asked of him without a trick in it. And because there was no trick, he found he could not give a clever answer. He could only give the real one. So he gave it. "I don't know what taking would even get me," Harry said slowly, frowning, working it out aloud as he worked out the toaster. "If I took something from a house and nobody knew, I'd still know. I'd have to keep it hidden. I'd have to keep being the person who took it. That sounds like more cupboard, not less." He stopped. The word cupboard had come out of him without permission, and he did not take it back because it was true, and the truth was the only tool he had. "And anyway," he went on quieter, "if the house was old and rich and nobody was looking after it anymore, I think I'd want to look after it. Not because somebody would catch me if I didn't, just because somebody should. Houses shouldn't be left." He looked up at the woven roof, at the place the four voices seemed to come from. Nothing should be left. For a long moment the ward said nothing. Then the gray-gold point at the center of the floating shield, the sleeping, waking thing, opened. There was no sound to it, and it was the loudest thing Harry had ever not heard. The point unfolded the way a fist unfolds into a hand, and out of it came light, gray-gold and 1,000 years deep, and it did not blaze, it welled, the way water wells from a spring, soft and certain and endless, and it filled the first hall from the slate floor to the woven roof, and it filled Harry, ran into him through his wet knees and his small ribs and the thin scar over his eyebrow, and it did not burn. It knew him. That was the thing he understood in the welling light, the thing he would never afterward be able to explain to anyone who had not stood where he stood, that the oldest magic of the oldest house in the magical world had reached the bottom of a 6-year-old boy, the place below the sums and the noticing, the place that answered to wanting, and had found there not a thing it needed to test, but a thing it recognized. "The answer is kept," said the ward, and the four voices were not four anymore, they were one single sound, vast and bright and grave and warm all at once, and the chord had become a verdict. 1,000 years we have held the question in our mouth, and 1,000 years the question has gone unspent. Tonight it is spent. Tonight the line has brought us one who comes to keep. The light pulled back. It did not leave him. It pulled back into the woven roof, and the roof rewove itself brighter than before, every thread a half-degree more gold, and on the back of Harry's right hand, between the small bones, a mark had appeared. It was not painted on. It was under the skin, gray gold, faint, the four-quartered shield no bigger than a coin, the lion and the eagle and the badger and the serpent, and at its center the single waking point, and as Harry watched, holding his own hand up before his face in the welling light, the mark sank slowly out of sight beneath his skin until there was only his hand again, dirty, 6 years old, ordinary. But it was there. He could feel that it was there, the way you can feel a splinter you cannot see. "Did you do?" Harry whispered. It was not fear. He would only let himself name the feeling once, later, in the cupboard, and the word he would settle on would not be fear. It would be a stranger and a larger word, and he did not have it yet. Standing in the first hall, he had no name for it at all. He only had the mark, sunk warm under the back of his hand, and the certainty, total and quiet, that something that had been true his whole life was now over, and a different true thing had started. A new voice answered him, not the chord. This one came from off to the side, from a doorway, dry and human and unmistakably tired in the way only living things and the very oldest paintings of living things ever sound. "What did they do?" said the voice. "Boy, they've gone and crowned you. Welcome to the worst secret you will ever have to keep." Harry turned. In the nearest of the black doorways, where there had been only dark, there now hung a portrait. It was tall and narrow and framed in stone, and the figure inside it was old, with a long gray beard not unlike a beard Harry would meet in the waking world before the month was out. But where that other beard would be white and merry, this one was iron, and the face above it was lined like a riverbed in a drought. He wore robes the color of old slate and a chain of office gone dull, and he was leaning on the frame from the inside the way a man leans on a fence he has leant on for centuries, and he was looking at Harry with an expression that was not unkind and was not, by any measure, comforting. "You can hear me, then," the portrait said. "Good. Most of them couldn't, the few that came near, heads full of grown wanting. You're too small to want the right wrong things yet, which is the only reason that," he flicked 2 fingers at the back of Harry's hand, at the place the mark had sunk, "took. They've been hunting for someone to put it on for 1,000 years, and they picked the one who can't tie his own shoes." He sighed, a sound like a door settling. "Edric," he added, "I was castellan here when there was a body to go with the name and a wage to go with the body. Now I'm the help." "Sit down before you fall down, you've gone the color of the floor." "I can't sit down," Harry said. "I'm not really here, I'm in a garden. There were boys they were going to." He stopped. The corner by the shed felt very far away and very thin, like a drawing of itself. "I have to go back, they'll know I'm gone." "They won't," said Edric, "not the ones in the garden. To them you'll have blinked. Bodies keep their own time and the line keeps another. That's the first thing, and you'll learn the rest later if there is a later, which with that on your hand is no longer the safe bet it was an hour ago." He straightened in his frame, and for a moment the tiredness went out of him and something underneath it showed through, something that had been a man who held a castle's keys and took it seriously. Listen to me, Harry Potter, because I have about as long as a candle has, and then they'll send you home. You will wake in your garden and nothing will look changed and everything will be. There is a mark on your hand now. It is the oldest claim in this country and it is asleep, and while it sleeps you are only a strange boy that strange things happen to, which you have survived being so far, but it will not sleep forever. Wake the way that did, he nodded at the woven roof, and when it wakes, men who have spent their whole lives learning to smell a claim like a shark smells blood are going to turn their heads all at once toward a house in Surrey where nobody marks your birthday. Do you understand me? No, Harry said honestly. No, Edric agreed. Good lad, the ones who say yes are lying. Understand this much then and keep it. Tell no one, not the fat one nor the thin one nor the loud one in your house. Not the teachers, and most of all, and here the old painted eyes sharpened to points, not the kind old man with the long white beard who's going to come and find you sooner than you'd like, with sweets in his pocket and a twinkle in his eye and the keys to this whole castle on a ring at his belt. He is the one who tied the other end of your mother's thread to our stone. He is not your enemy. He is worse than an enemy. He is a man who is certain he is right. Edric leaned close until his painted face filled the frame. When he asks you questions, Harry, and he will ask you questions, you give him the same kind of answer you gave them. You tell the truth, but you choose which truth. Can you do that? Can you choose which true thing to say? Harry thought of the toaster, hot on the left, and the long, thin look on Aunt Petunia's face, and all the times he had learned which true things were allowed. Yes, he said, I can do that. Then you'll do, said Edric, and leaned back, and something in the hall began to draw away, the light dimming at the edges, the floor note dropping out from under Harry's feet, the great woven roof receding up into a dark that was beginning, gently, to be only a dark. Go home, Heir, mind your knees, and come back the way you came when you can, but not in front of the fat one. The line will know you now. It will open for you. It is the only door in your life that ever will, so use it kindly. The portrait was very far away suddenly, a coin of light at the end of a tunnel. Harry, Edric called from 1,000 miles off, and the dryness was gone from his voice and there was only the tired old fondness underneath, the sound of a man who had held a house too long and just learned the house had finally chosen someone to give itself to. It's good to have a master again. We'd forgotten what it was for. The first hall folded shut like a closing eye. Harry fell. He fell down the thread, down the great humming line, down through the clay and the cold and the flat gray weight of Surrey, and he landed back inside his own skin with a jolt that knocked the breath out of him, and the world rushed in all at once. The smell of trampled begonias, the cold brick of the shed against his back, the gray lid of sky, and Dudley's fist, which had been going to land, which had not yet landed, which was hanging in the air not one full second after it had begun to fall. To them you'll have blinked. The fist came down. It caught Harry on the shoulder, not the face, because Harry had moved, his body had flinched without him while his mind was 1,000 years away, and the blow that should have been a bad one was only a glancing one. And Dudley, off balance, his target gone soft and sideways, stumbled into the fence and sat down hard in Aunt Petunia's ruined begonias with a sound like a sack of flour dropped off a lorry. There was a silence in the corner by the shed. Piers laughed because Piers laughed before things were funny, but it came out uncertain because this was not the script. Malcolm and Gordon looked at Dudley sitting in the flowers and then at Harry, who was standing, who had not run, who was looking at his own right hand with an expression none of them had a name for, turning it over, frowning, as if there was something on the back of it that only he could see. He pushed me, Dudley said from the begonias, his voice gone wet and rising toward the wail that would bring Aunt Petunia out of the house at a dead run. Mum, he pushed me, but Harry was not listening to Dudley. Harry was looking at the back of his right hand, at the place between the small bones, where just for a moment before it sank away again under the dirt and the skin and the ordinary 6-year-old flesh of it, something gray-gold had pulsed, soft, like a thing asleep that had begun very slowly, and for the first time in 1,000 years, to remember that it was supposed to wake. Far to the north, in a round office at the top of a tower, in a school that sat empty in the slow gray of the summer holidays, a great many small silver instruments stood on a great many spindle-legged tables, and they were doing what they had always done, which was nothing, the patient nothing of machines that watch a thing that does not change. One of them changed. It was an old instrument, older than most, a thing of dull gray gold metal that had stood unregarded on the highest shelf for longer than anyone now living had been headmaster, and it had never in all that time made a sound. It made one now. A single clear note like a struck bell heard through a wall, and then it began very slowly to turn. There was no one in the office to hear it. The portraits of the old headmasters dozed in their frames. The fire was banked low. And on the highest shelf the old gray gold instrument turned and turned, marking a thing that had not been marked in 1,000 years, ringing its one clear note out into the empty room over and over, patient as a heartbeat, waiting for someone to come back and ask it what it had finally, after all this time, found. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2. The voice in the stone. They locked him in the cupboard for a day and a half over the begonias and the bruise on Dudley's pride, and Harry, who had spent a great deal of his life in that cupboard, used the time the way a prisoner uses a sentence he has decided not to waste. He experimented. The problem was a problem of method. He had gone down the thread once, in the corner by the shed, and the going had not been a choice. It had been the bottom of him answering a thing he wanted all the way down, and you could not simply want things all the way down on purpose, the way you could not tickle yourself. Harry had tried wanting on purpose for most of the first night. He had lain on the thin mattress with his eyes shut and wanted to go back to the first hall with everything he had, and nothing had happened except that his stomach had growled and the boards over his head had creaked with Dudley's weight going up to bed. So wanting on purpose was the wrong method. Harry put it aside. He was good at putting wrong methods aside. Most people, he had noticed, fell in love with their first idea and then spent all their effort trying to drag the world into agreeing with it, and you could get a lot done in the gaps left by people doing that. He thought instead about the corner by the shed, exactly the whole of it, the way you turn a key in a lock by feel in the dark. He had not been wanting in general, he had been wanting out. Out of the corner, out of his skin, out of the flat gray weight of the whole place. And under the wanting, before the thread sang, there had been a falling feeling, a trapdoor opening, and the trapdoor had not been a thing he made. It had been a thing he found because he had stopped for 1/2 second at the bottom of the bad moment, holding himself so tight and had let go. That was the method, not wanting harder. Wanting and then letting go of the wanting so that it had somewhere to fall. The cupboard was very dark and it smelled of dust and old rubber, and under everything the floor polish from the hall, which Harry had decided long ago was the best of the 3 smells, and he held on to the floor polish smell the way you hold a rail, and he wanted to go back, and then between one breath and the next he stopped holding the wanting and let it fall. The trapdoor was there. It had been there the whole time, he understood, the way the back of your own head is there the whole time and you simply cannot see it. He went down through it, down past the boards and the cold London clay, down to the great taut humming line strung across the country, and the line knew him now, the way Edric had said it would. It did not have to be persuaded. It opened under his hand like a held breath let go, and Harry Potter fell up out of his cupboard and into the heart of the oldest house in the magical world. He landed on his feet this time. The first hall rang faintly under him, that single clear bell note heard through a wall, and the woven roof turned slowly overhead, 10,000 threads of gray-gold light crossing and recrossing, brighter at the edges than he remembered, as if a banked fire had been fed a little in his absence. The cold of the slate came up through his bare feet. He was, he noticed, exactly as he had been in the cupboard, in the old pajamas 2 sizes too big that had been Dudley's, and his feet were bare, and that was interesting because it meant the place did not dress him, it took him as he came. A thing that takes you as you come, Harry thought, is a rare thing and worth being careful with. There you are, said Edric from his frame in the nearest doorway. 2 nights. I'd half decided they'd drowned you in a water butt and saved everyone the trouble. The old painted castellan looked exactly as he had, iron-bearded, robed in slate, leaning on the inside of his frame with the bottomless patience of a thing that has nowhere else to be. But his eyes moved over Harry quickly, top to bottom, bare feet and borrowed pajamas and the thin face, and whatever he saw there put a line between his painted brows. You came on your own. Nobody pushed you. You found the door. I worked it out, Harry said. He could not keep it entirely out of his voice, the thing that was not pride but was next door to pride, the plain satisfaction of a problem that had agreed with itself. You have to want it and then let go of the wanting. The letting go is the part. The wanting on its own just sits there. Edric was quiet for a moment. 1,000 years, he said to no one, to the woven roof. 1,000 years and the door opens for a barefoot infant who reasoned his way to it from inside a cupboard. He shook his head slowly. Do you know how the last one tried, the last one who got close, a grown wizard 200 years gone, clever as they come and twice as certain. He built an engine, brass and bloodstone, 6 months in the building to force the door. The door is not a thing you force, boy. The door is a thing you ask. He never understood the difference, and it cost him his mind and most of his blood. And you, he flicked 2 painted fingers at Harry's bare feet, at the borrowed pajamas, you understood it before breakfast. The line stayed between his brows. That's either the best thing I've seen in 3 centuries or the worst, and I genuinely cannot tell you which. Why would it be the worst? Because the easier a thing comes to you, said Edric, the less you'll guard it, and you have a great deal to guard now and no idea yet how much. Sit or stand, whatever you do in those rags, I'm meant to teach you, the stone has decided, and I've not had a pupil in so long I've forgotten whether I'm any good at it. So Harry sat cross-legged on the cold slate in the center of the first hall, in the place where the 4-quartered shield had hung in the air the night they crowned him, and the great ward turned its attention down to listen, and Edric the Castellan, dead these many centuries and reduced to paint and tiredness and a chain of office gone dull, began, for the first time in longer than the Dursleys' whole street had existed, to teach. There were 4 of them, Edric said. You'll have been told that much, even out there in the brick country. Even the ones who hate the word will have let it slip. 4, they built this, not the walls only, any mason can stack a wall. They built the thing inside the walls, the binding, the deep magic, the thing that is talking to you now through the soles of your feet. He nodded up at the woven roof. Godric, Helga, Rowena, Salazar. Names worn so smooth by 1,000 years of mouths that nobody remembers they were people, that they argued about drainage and disliked each other's cooking and one of them snored. They were people, and then they were old and dying the way people do, and they had built the best thing any of them would ever build, and they could not bear to leave it to be run by whoever happened along. So they put themselves in the walls, Harry said. Not themselves. Edric's painted mouth did something dry. A portrait is not the person, I should know. They put their will in the walls, their judgment, the shape of what they wanted this house to be and the power to make the house be it. 4 wills woven together, set to keep the castle and choose its keepers when no living hand was fit. That weaving is the ward. It is not Godric and it is not Helga, it is the 4 of them agreeing forever, which is a stranger and a stronger thing than any one of them alive, because the 4 of them agreeing was rare enough to be worth making permanent. He paused. They agreed on the keepers mostly, the headmasters, the line of them holding the castle's outer keys, the doors and the wards that keep the rain off, the small magic, the running of the place. That was meant to be enough. For most of 1,000 years it was enough. But there's a deeper magic, Harry said, the one that's talking to me. The headmasters don't have that one. No, and here Edric leaned forward in his frame, and the dryness went out of him, and the thing underneath showed through again, the castellan who had held a castle's keys and counted it the work of his life. The 4 kept one thing back from the headmasters, the deepest binding. The heart magic, the foundation, the part of the ward that could remake the castle root and branch, open the sealed places, command the stone itself. They did not give that to the keepers, because keepers come and go and not all of them are kind, and a thing that powerful in an unkind hand would be the end of everything they built, so they sealed it. They made a lock for it that no headmaster could pick and no engine could force, and they wrote into the lock a single question, and they said, "This we will not give for blood alone, and this we will not give for power, and this we will not give for cleverness. This we give to the one who answers the question true. And if no one ever answers it true, then let it sleep forever, and let the castle make do with keepers, and that is no tragedy, for a sleeping crown breaks no heads." Harry thought about the question. Do you come to take, or do you come to keep? He thought about the answer he had given about the cupboard, about how taking just sounded like more cupboard. "I didn't know it was a test," he said. "When I answered, I thought it was just a question." "That," said Edric, "is precisely why it worked. The lock can tell the difference between a child answering a question and a man answering a test." 1,000 of the second came and went over the centuries, near enough, the ones who got even this far, and every one of them knew it was a test, and so every one of them gave the answer they thought would win, and the lock weighed the answer and found the wanting underneath it and turned them away. "You weighed nothing, you just told it the truth about cupboards." He sat back. "Now, the lock is 2 gates, and you have only passed the first. You should know what you actually are before the rest of the world starts telling you what you are, because the rest of the world will be wrong on purpose and you'll want something true to stand on." 2 gates, Harry repeated. He liked that there were 2. 2 was a structure. A thing with structure could be understood. The first gate is the question, and that gate weighs your heart, and you passed it, and that is the rarer of the 2 by far. Edric held up a painted finger. But the 4 were not fools, and they did not want the deep magic going to just any kind soul who wandered down the line. A castle is not a charity. It needed an heir with a claim, a thread of the founding blood, however thin, so that what woke in the stone would recognize the hand that woke it as kin, and not as a stranger doing a kindness. The second gate is blood. And this is the part, the finger turned and pointed at Harry, where you are going to want to sit very still, because I have had a long time to read the lines written in this stone, and I have read yours. Harry sat very still. He was good at sitting very still. It was one of the first things the cupboard had taught him. "Potter," said Edric, "is a young name as these things go, a few 100 years. But it is a young name grown out of an old one, the way a young tree grows out of a buried root, and the old root is Peveril." He said the name, and the name had weight to it. Peveril is one of the oldest names this country has, and one of the most thoroughly dead. Every line of it run out or married off or vanished, except that they did not all vanish, did they? Because here you sit. And Peveril married, 400 years back and more, into a cadet branch of a house that called itself by the Lion before there was a school to put a lion in, a younger cousin of Godric's own line. A thread so thin by now you could not have found it with the best blood quill in Gringotts. Thin, but not cut. Nothing in this stone is ever quite cut. He let it sit. "You carry Godric's blood, Harry Potter, not much of it, a drop in a long river, but the lock does not measure how much. The lock only asks, is there a true thread, and does the heart that comes on it come to keep? And in you, for the first time in 1,000 years, the answer to both is yes." The hall was very quiet. Even the bell note seemed to be holding still. Harry looked down at the back of his right hand at the place between the small bones where the mark had sunk. He turned the hand over. There was nothing to see, only an ordinary 6-year-old hand, dirt still under 2 of the nails from the begonias. But he could feel it there, the 4-quartered shield, the lion and the eagle and the badger and the serpent, warm and asleep under the skin, and now he knew that one of those 4 animals was, in the thinnest and oldest way, his own. "So I'm," he stopped. He did not have the word, and he did not want to use the wrong one, because using the wrong word about yourself was how other people got to decide what you were. I'm related to one of the people who built this. You are the heir of all four of them, said Edric, by the only measure that ever mattered to them, which is the measure of the lock, and the lock has measured you, and the lock has crowned you, and the mark on your hand is the proof, and there is not a man alive who can take it off you, because there is not a man alive who put it on. His voice dropped. Which is exactly the reason your life just became more dangerous than you can possibly understand, and I am going to spend whatever time you can steal teaching you why and how to live through it. But not tonight. Tonight you're going to do one thing because the stone wants to see you do it, and because you have earned the right to try. Stand up. Harry stood. Look at the eastern doorway, Edric said. The high one with the spiral over the lintel. Go and stand before it. Harry crossed the hall. His bare feet made no sound the cold could not swallow. The eastern doorway was tall and narrow, and over its lintel a spiral had been cut into the stone, a true spiral tightening as it turned, and the doorway itself was not dark like the others. It was filled with a thin gray shimmer like the surface of water seen edge on, and when Harry came close, the shimmer made a sound, a single chime, high and clear, and out of the chime came a voice that was not Edric's and was not the great chord of the ward. It was a woman's voice, light and exact and amused, and it came from the doorway the way a question comes from a teacher who already knows the answer and is curious whether you do. A door, said the voice, for those who would rather think than knock. Answer and pass, fail and think again. There is no shame in thinking again. There is only shame in pretending you knew. That's Rowena, Edric called from across the hall, sounding entertained. Or the shape of her she left on this door. She always did make people earn the library. Mind yourself, she's fond of the ones that catch the trick and merciless to the ones that bluster. I'm ready, Harry said to the door. He was not certain he was ready, but he had learned that you said you were ready and then you found out because the other way around never came. The door asked its riddle. I am not the wall, said Row in his light, exact voice, and I am not the gate, and I am not the lock, and I am not the key. I stand between the one who knows and the one who would. Cross me without leave, and you are a thief. Cross me with leave, and you are a guest. I am the same in both. What am I? Harry stood before the shimmering gray door and thought. This was the part he was good at. This was the only part of his whole life that had ever belonged entirely to him, the inside of a problem, the place where Aunt Petunia could not reach and Dudley's fists could not follow, and even the great cord of the ward turned down to a held breath to watch. He turned the riddle over, not the wall, not the gate, not the lock, not the key. So it was not the things you would first reach for, which meant the riddle was warning him off the easy answer, which meant there was an easy answer, and the easy answer was door, and the riddle had spent its first 4 lines making sure you would not say door. I stand between the one who knows and the one who would, between the one who already knows the thing and the one who only wants to. So it was the thing that stood between knowing and wanting to know. Cross me without leave, and you are a thief. Cross me with leave, and you are a guest. I am the same in both. The thing did not change, you changed. Whether you were a thief or a guest depended on you, on whether you had leave, on whether you came to take or came to keep, and Harry's mind went very still because he had heard that distinction before, 3 nights ago in the same hall, from the same kind of old amused magic. It was not a door was just the shape it wore. It's a threshold, Harry said slowly. Not the door, the line, the edge you cross. It's the same line whether you're allowed or not. You're the thing that's different, not it. It just knows the difference. It's the place where they find out what you are. He paused, working the last of it. It's the question from the first night, isn't it? The take or keep one. You made it into a door. For a moment nothing happened, and Harry had the cold thought that he had bluffed and that Rowena was merciless to the ones who bluffed. Then the door laughed. It was a real laugh, light and surprised and entirely without cruelty. The laugh of a clever woman who has been answered by someone she did not expect to answer her, and the gray shimmer in the doorway rang like struck crystal and parted down the middle and drew back into the stone on either side, and the doorway stood open, and beyond it Harry could see the first 3 steps of a stair winding up and up into a soft, paper-scented dark. Leave granted, guest, said Rowena's voice, fading now, satisfied. You found the trick and you did not pretend. The trick is that there was never a trick. Come up when you are taught enough to know what not to take and not before. The books bite the unready. And the voice was gone, and the stair stood open and waiting, and from somewhere far up it a single page turned by itself in a draft that had not blown in 1,000 years. Across the hall, Edric was very quiet in his frame. What? Said Harry, suddenly uncertain, looking back at him. Did I do it wrong? She said. Leave granted. You did it right, said Edric. There was something in his painted voice that had not been there before, something careful, the voice of a man recalculating a sum he had thought he already knew the answer to. You did it right the first time with no teaching, the way you found the door the first time with no teaching, Harry. He came as close to the front of his frame as the paint would let him. The wizards out there, the grown ones, the trained ones, they would have stood at that door for an hour. They would have said door because the riddle told them not to and they cannot help themselves. The cleverest of them might have got threshold in the end, with the door laughing at them the whole time. Not one of them in 100 years would have got the last part, the part where the door is the founder's own question wearing a costume. You got the costume off it in under a minute, barefoot, 6 years old, on no sleep and no breakfast. The careful look held. I need you to understand that this is not normal, not for a child, not for a man. The stone did not crown you only because your heart is kind and your blood is thin and true. The stone crowned you because you see, Harry, you see the shape under the thing, and that is the rarest and most dangerous gift a person can carry into a world full of people who have spent their whole lives building things they very much do not want seen through. Harry did not know what to do with that, so he did what he always did with things he did not know what to do with. He set it aside carefully in the place he kept things to be understood later, and he asked a question. Who doesn't want to be seen through? Edric opened his mouth to answer. And far to the north, in a round office at the top of a tower, the answer to Harry's question was at that moment climbing a moving spiral stair 2 steps at a time, robes the color of a kingfisher streaming behind him, because one of his instruments had been ringing for 3 days and he had been away, and he had come back to a sound he had never heard in 50 years of headmastery and did not like. Albus Dumbledore was not a young man, but he took the last of the stair without slowing, and the gargoyle had barely finished grinding shut behind him before he was across the office and reaching up to the highest shelf, where a thing of dull gray-gold metal that he had inherited along with the office, that had stood silent and unregarded through his whole tenure and the tenure of every headmaster he could name, was turning slowly on its base and ringing one clear note over and over, patient as a heartbeat. He took it down. He held it in both hands, the way you hold a bird you're not sure is hurt, and he turned it, and he watched the way the gray-gold light moved through it, and the merriment that lived on the surface of his face, the twinkle that had reassured 2 generations of frightened children, drained quietly away and left something else behind, something older and a great deal harder. Face of a man who had spent a long life arranging the safety of the world to his own careful design, and had just felt one of the arrangements move without his hand on it. Now what? Albus Dumbledore said softly to the empty office, to the dozing portraits, to the turning instrument. Are you? The instrument did not answer in words. It answered in the only language it had, which was the language of the deep wards of the castle, and it told him, in the slow turning of its gray-gold light, 3 things. Told him that the foundation magic of Hogwarts, the deep binding that no headmaster in 1,000 years had been able to touch, the sleeping crown the 4 had locked away beyond any living reach, had stirred. It told him that the stirring had a direction, a thread running south and east out of the castle down a ley line, to an anchor he himself had set with his own wand 6 years before around a house in Surrey where he had left a child to grow up safe and ordinary and unremarkable, and out of the way. And it told him, though it took him a long cold minute to be sure he was reading it right, that the deep magic had not merely stirred. The deep magic had answered something. The lock the 4 had set, the lock he had studied for decades and never come close to picking, the lock he had privately concluded would sleep until the castle fell, the lock was open. Somewhere down that thread in the house in Surrey, in the child he had placed there and watched from a careful distance and intended, when the time came, to gently and kindly, and for the very best of reasons, shape into the weapon the world would need. Somewhere down that thread, the oldest power in magical Britain had just chosen a master, and it had not asked him, and it had not chosen him, and it had not even told him until the choosing was done. Albus Dumbledore set the instrument down very gently on his desk and sat and steepled his long fingers before his face and did not move for a long time. The fire burned low, the portraits dozed. Behind the half-moon spectacles, behind the carefully maintained kindness that was not entirely a lie and not entirely the truth, a mind that had outmaneuvered dark lords and ministers, and the slow grinding wheel of history itself began methodically to work out how a 6-year-old had done in an evening what he had failed to do in 50 years, and what it would cost and who else would feel it, and how quickly he would have to move to make certain that whatever had woken in that child woke in the end. On his side, Severus, he said at last to the empty room, though Severus was a county away and asleep, I think it is time I looked in on Lily's son. Far to the south, in the heart of the oldest house in the magical world, Harry Potter stood barefoot before an open door that had not opened in 1,000 years, and listened to an old dead castellan tell him, gently, who it was that did not want to be seen through, and why the kindest man he would ever meet was the one he must be most careful never, ever to let see all the way down to the bottom of him. Remember, the mark sleeps, Edric was saying, very quiet now, very serious, the entertainment all gone out of him. While it sleeps you have a little time, days, maybe a week or 2 of grace, no more, because the moment it answered the stone, it lit a candle that men with the right instruments can see from a long way off, and one of them has just walked back into a tower in the north and is looking at the candle right now. I'd stake my frame on it. So learn fast, Harry. Learn everything I can teach you, and learn it quickly, because the next person to come down this thread to find you will not be a barefoot child reasoning his way through a cupboard door. He will be the cleverest and kindest and most dangerous man in this whole country, and he will arrive with sweets in his pocket and the keys to this castle on his belt, and he will love you in his way, which is the part that will make him so very hard to refuse. The old painted eyes held Harry's, steady and grim and underneath, afraid for him. Now, you've an hour before the cupboard wants you back in your body. Let me show you what the open door is for, and let me start teaching you the only lesson that will keep you alive, how to be the most powerful thing in the room and let absolutely no one know it. How do you hide being powerful? Harry said. It was not a complaint. It was the practical question, the toaster question, the one that asked how the machine actually worked. If the candle's already lit, if they can already see it, how do you put it back? You don't put it back, said Edric. You can't. A lit candle is lit. What you do is be the last thing anyone suspects of carrying a flame. You are 6, you are thin. You wear another child's pajamas, and you have garden dirt under your nails, and you live in a cupboard, and every grown wizard who comes hunting that candle is going to be looking for a fortress, a vault, a great dark engine humming in a tower somewhere. None of them, not one, is going to look first at a barefoot infant in Surrey, because their own cleverness will not let them. The powerful always assume power looks like them. That is the whole of the lesson, and it will keep you alive for years if you let it. Let them keep looking for the fortress, be the cupboard. The cupboard is the safest thing you own. Harry considered this. It had the shape of a true thing. It agreed with itself the way the second measurement of the cupboard had agreed with the first. All right, he said, be the cupboard. I'm good at being the cupboard. I've had practice. Something moved across Edric's painted face that the paint had clearly not been mixed to show, and he looked away for a moment up at the woven roof, and when he looked back his voice had gone rougher. Aye, he said, you have. Well, the stone wants to show you the rest of what you've inherited before it sends you back, and I'd not deny it. It's waited 1,000 years to show someone. Stand in the center where they crowned you. And Harry, whatever you see, don't be afraid of the size of it. Size is just a thing that is large. You faced worse things that were small. Harry walked back to the center of the first hall, to the cold place on the slate where the four-quartered shield had hung, and he stood, bare feet together, and he waited, and the ward woke around him. It did not blaze. The deep magic never blazed. Harry would learn that blazing was for small magic, for wands and sparks and the things that had to shout because they would soon be gone. The deep magic welled. The woven roof poured its gray-gold light down the walls in slow sheets, and the walls, where the light touched them, stopped being walls. They became windows. Not windows onto the grounds or the sky, but windows onto the castle's own deep places, the sealed and secret rooms the four had locked away with the heart magic, and the windows opened one after another all around the round of the hall until Harry stood at the center of a ring of impossible doors, each one looking through stone and distance into a chamber no living person had walked in for 1,000 years. Through one he saw a vault of blades, hundreds of them, swords and knives and a single long spear, each hung point down from a ceiling of black iron, and they turned very slowly in a wind that did not exist, and the light that lay along their edges was the red gold of a banked forge, and Harry understood without being told that this was the Lion's Keep, Godric's, and that one of those blades had a name and was waiting for a hand. Through another he saw a deep round cistern of black water, still as glass, and on its floor, dim and green and vast, the bones of something that had been the length of the hall, coiled and sleeping in death the way it must have slept in life. And over the water a single carved word in a tongue that hissed even when no one read it aloud, and Harry knew this was the serpent's deep, Salazar's, and he did not want to look at it long, and the window kindly moved on. Through a third he saw shelves. Only shelves, rising up and up past the edge of the window into a paper-scented dark, 10,000 books and 10,000 more, and ladders that moved themselves, and a single lamp burning at a reading desk where no one sat, where someone had clearly meant to sit, where a quill lay across an open page as if its writer had stepped out a moment ago and 1,000 years had happened in the moment. Rowenas, the eagles. The stair he had opened led here, and he understood now why she had said not before. A person could lose their whole self up those ladders and call it a life well spent. And through the fourth window Harry saw a room with a hearth in it. It was the smallest of the four, and it undid him more than the blades or the bones. It was a kitchen, or had been, a great warm, low-ceilinged kitchen with a hearth at the heart of it the size of a cottage, and the hearth was lit. After 1,000 years it was still lit, banked low and golden and patient, and over it hung a black pot, and around it stood a long scrubbed table with benches enough for 100, and the whole room had the particular ache of a place that was built to be full and had been empty a very long time and had kept the fire going anyway, just in case someone came home. The badger's hearth, Helga's. The window onto it was warm. Harry could feel the warmth of it on his face from across the impossible distance, the only one of the four that reached out to touch him, and he stood in his borrowed pajamas in the cold of the first hall and let the warmth of a 1,000-year-old kitchen fall on him, and did not move because moving would end it. She built that, Edric said quietly from his frame. Helga. The other three built keeps and libraries and deep dark cisterns full of clever murder, and Helga built a kitchen and kept the fire in, and put it in the deep magic so it could never go out, not if the castle stood empty for 10,000 years, not if every other fire in the world went cold. They argued about it. Godric thought it a waste of the deepest binding they had. She told him a house that cannot feed a frightened child is not a house worth warding, and she won because she was right, and because she was the only one of the four that the other three could not bear to disappoint. He was very quiet. It has been burning the whole time, Harry. The whole time you were in your cupboard, it was burning. Harry did not say anything. He looked at the fire, and the fire looked at him, in the way that fires do, and the thing he had no name for moved at the bottom of him, the thing larger and stranger than fear, and he understood for the first time, standing barefoot at the center of all four founders' deepest work, that of everything the ward had shown him, this was the thing it most wanted him to have. Not the blades, not the books. The fire that someone had kept lit for 1,000 years on the chance that one day a frightened child would come down the line with cold feet and need it. "This is yours now," said the ward, the great cord rolling up through the slate into the soles of his bare feet, and the four voices in it were gentle, gentle the way only enormous things can afford to be gentle. All of it, the blade and the book and the deep and the fire. "We have kept it 1,000 years against your coming, and you have come, and it is yours, heir, to shelter as you swore." And it was then, in the welling grey-gold light, with all four windows open around him and the warmth of Helga's fire on his face, that Harry's eyes, which saw the shape under things, which had taken the costume off Rowena's door in under a minute, caught on something that did not belong. It ran through the weave of the light. He almost missed it because it was the opposite of the light, and the eye slides off the opposite of light the way a hand slides off ice. But Harry's eye did not slide. It was one of his gifts and his curse that his eye did not slide off the things other eyes were built to miss. There, woven into the grey-gold lattice, threaded through the deep magic like a single black hair baked into a loaf of bread, ran a thread that was wrong. It was thin. It was old. It was the color of nothing, the color of the green light at the very bottom of his own memory, and it did not well it drank, and where it touched the grey-gold threads of the ward they were a half-shade dimmer than their neighbors, the smallest measure, the kind of dimness you would only notice if you were a child who measured cupboards twice because the first time felt like a guess. "Edric," Harry said slowly, "what's that one?" The warmth went out of the hall. It did not go all at once. The four windows did not close. But Edric came very still in his frame, the particular stillness of a thing that has been asked the question it hoped would not come for years yet, and the great cord of the ward fell silent, all four voices at once, and the silence had a held quality, the quality of a house where someone has just said aloud the thing the house has been not mentioning for a very long time. "Which one?" said Edric, and his painted voice was careful now, level, the voice of a man stepping where the floor might not be. "The black one," Harry said. He lifted his marked hand and pointed, and the thread was so thin he had to move his finger twice to put it on the line of it. "Going through everything. It doesn't shine like the others. It's drinking them just a little. Where it touches, they're darker." He looked from the thread to the portrait. "It's been there a long time, hasn't it? Longer than me. The threads near it are thinner. It's been drinking them so slow nobody counted." For a moment the only sound in the heart of the oldest house in the magical world was Helga's fire, burning on 1,000 years, in a kitchen no one had eaten in since before England had a queen. "That," said Edric the Castellan at last, very quietly, "is the thing I was not going to tell you about tonight because you have had enough for one cupboard's worth of sleep and because I did not think you would see it. No one has seen it, not in 200 years. Not the engine builder, not the keepers in their tower, not me until I had paint and a frame and 1,000 nights to stare at the same ceiling." The old eyes met his, and what was in them now was not fondness and was not entertainment. "But you saw it before breakfast, of course you did, because that is what you are. So, you'll know this much, and then you'll go back to your body and sleep, and we will speak of it properly when you are stronger and I am braver. That thread is a wound, Harry. Someone put it there long ago with great patience and greater malice, and it has been drinking the castle's deep magic one thread at a time for longer than anyone living has been alive, and it is the real reason the four left the deepest binding asleep and waiting for an heir. They knew the wound was coming. They could not stop it, not in their time, so they left a crown for the one who could." He let that settle, all the weight of it, onto the bare shoulders of a 6-year-old in another child's pajamas. "The castle did not only crown you because you came to keep, lad. It crowned you because it is bleeding, and you are the first one in 1,000 years with the right and the eyes and the heart to find what is bleeding it and stop the hand." Harry looked back at the thread, the single black hair baked through the golden loaf, drinking patient old. "Who put it there?" he said. "That," said Edric, "is the question that will fill the rest of your nights. And the answer to it is already moving, Harry. The moment the crown woke it felt the crown wake the way you felt it. So sleep while you can, be the cupboard, and come back to me, because we have a great deal to do and not, I think, a great deal of time to do it in." The stair behind the open door breathed out its paper-scented dark, and another page turned far up by itself, and the four windows dimmed one by one until only Helga's hearth still glowed, warm and gold and patient against the dark, and Harry Potter, 6 years old, barefoot, the oldest claim in the country, sleeping warm under the back of his hand, and a single black thread now burned into the back of his eyes, went down the line to his cupboard to sleep. And to wait for the hand that had heard the crown wake to come looking for the child who wore it. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. The crowning for 9 nights Harry went down the line and learned, and for 9 days he did the eggs and the front beds and the washing up and said yes Aunt Petunia and no Uncle Vernon and was, to every eye at number 4, exactly the strange unwanted boy he had always been, and the gap between the 9 nights and the 9 days grew so wide that he began to worry he would one day fall into it. The worry was a practical one. He had worked out by the 4th night that he was running 2 lives, and that 2 lives is a great deal of life for a 6-year-old who is only allowed 1 meal he doesn't cook himself. He was tired in a way that did not show because he had learned long ago not to let tiredness show. The mark under his right hand had begun to do a thing it had not done before. It had begun to warm, not painfully, not even unpleasantly. But on the 9th morning, kneeling in the dirt at the front beds, Harry had pulled off his glove to feel a weed's root and seen, for the space of 3 heartbeats, the 4-quartered shield glowing faint gray-gold under the skin of his hand in broad Surrey daylight, the lion turning its head, the serpent uncoiling, before it sank away again and left only his ordinary dirty fingers. He had looked up fast. Aunt Petunia had been at the window with a cup of tea, watching him as she always watched him, and she had not seen because she was looking at the Harry she expected, and the Harry she expected did not glow. But it had glowed, in daylight, awake. It's waking up, Harry told Edric that night, holding his hand up in the welling light of the first hall so the old castellan could see. On its own, I didn't do anything. It got warm and then I could see it, outside, where anyone could have looked. Edric did not answer at once, which was how Harry had learned to tell when Edric was about to say a true thing he did not enjoy saying. I know, Edric said. We've felt it. The stones felt it for days. You've been coming down and feeding it without meaning to every night you come. A little more of you stays behind in the weave, and the crown has been drinking that, growing toward you the way a plant grows toward a window. He came forward in his frame. It was always going to wake, Harry. The mark they put on you in the first hour was only the seed of the thing. A seed sleeps, but you watered it. 9 nights running you came down and stood in the heart of us and let the deep magic know your shape, and now it knows your shape so well that it has begun to wear it, even up there, even in the daylight, even when you're only pulling weeds. His painted mouth went grim. The grace is ending. I told you days, maybe a week. It's been 9. When it wakes all the way, and that will be soon, it will not be a candle any more that clever men can see from far off. It will be a beacon, and every instrument in the country that was ever tuned to this castle's deep magic will scream at once. Then let's not wake it, Harry said, the practical answer. If I stop coming down, if I let it go back to sleep. You can't unwater seed, said Edric almost gently. And even if you could, Harry, look at me, the thread, the black one. The wound in the weave, you've seen it now, it's still drinking. Every day you don't wake the crown, it drinks a day more, and one of those days it will have drunk enough, and the castle will start to die in earnest, the deep way, the way that can't be turned back. The crown is the only thing in the world with the right to touch that thread. Asleep, you're a strange boy in a cupboard. Awake, you're the one hand that can reach into the deepest binding of Hogwarts and pull a knife out of its heart. You don't get to choose to stay a seed. You only get to choose whether you're awake when it matters or asleep when it's too late. Harry looked at the black thread running through the golden weave, patient, drinking. He thought about Helga's fire burning 1,000 years in an empty kitchen on the chance that a frightened child might come home cold. He thought about the cupboard and the begonias and the blank square on the calendar and all the small gray weight of a life where nothing was his. This was his. All right, Harry said, wake it up. The first hall went still. You understand what you ask, said the ward, the 4 voices rolling up through the slate. We have held the crown asleep 1,000 years because a sleeping crown breaks no heads. Wake it, and the world will know by morning that the heir of Hogwarts lives. There is no putting it back to sleep. There is no pretending it did not happen. From the hour it wakes you will be hunted by every hand that ever wanted what you hold. Knowing this, do you still ask? Yes, Harry said. He did not have to think about it, which was itself a thing worth noticing because Harry thought about everything. The fire's been burning the whole time. Somebody has to look after the house. You picked me, so wake it up and let's go pull the knife out. For a long moment nothing happened. And then the oldest house in the magical world did a thing it had not done in 1,000 years, which was to crown its heir not in seed and sleep but in waking fire. It began at the center of the woven roof, where the 10,000 threads of gray-gold light crossed and recrossed, and it began as a single point of brightness, soft, the same sleeping-waking point Harry had seen on the floating shield the first night. The point opened, and this time it did not well gently, this time it poured. Light came down out of the roof in a single column, gray-gold and 1,000 years deep, and it found Harry standing barefoot in the center of the hall, and it fell on him and through him, and did not stop. The 4 windows on the walls blazed open all at once, the blades and the books and the deep black water and the burning hearth, and from each of them a ribbon of light unspooled and crossed the hall and touched him. The red gold of the forge and the white gold of the lamp and the green dark glimmer of the cistern and the warm low gold of the kitchen fire, 4 ribbons winding into one at the center of his chest. And the great chord of the ward rose and rose until it was not a chord any longer but a single vast note, the floor note, the bell behind the wall, ringing out at full voice for the first time since the 4 who made it had been alive to hear it. On the back of Harry's right hand, the four-quartered shield rose up out of the skin and stayed. It did not sink away this time. It burned there gray gold and bright, the lion and the eagle and the badger and the serpent each turning in its quarter, and at its center the waking point blazed full open, no longer asleep, no longer a seed, a thing awake and aware in Harry's, and the warmth of it ran up his arm and into his chest and met the four ribbons there and became something Harry had no word for, a sense, a knowing, a feeling of the castle the way you feel your own hand in the dark. He could feel it, all of it. Every sealed door and secret stair, every stone of the deep foundation, the blades turning in Godric's keep and the lamp burning at Rowan's desk and the great green bones sleeping in Salazar's water and the fire, Helga's fire, banked and golden and 1,000 years patient. And he could feel, too, threaded through all of it, drinking the black wound, closer now, realer now, no longer a thing he merely saw but a thing he could feel, like a splinter in his own skin, like a thief in his own house. Heir of Hogwarts, said the ward, and the four voices had become one and the one had become a verdict and the verdict shook the slate. The crown is woken. The deep magic is yours to command and yours to shelter and ours from this hour to serve. What you bid the stone will do. Who comes against this house comes against you, and who comes against you comes against 1,000 years. Rise and be known. The light pulled back. It did not leave him. It would never leave him again. It pulled back into the roof and the four windows and the burning hearth, and the hall settled, and Harry Potter stood at the center of it, barefoot, 6 years old, in another child's pajamas, with the oldest crown in the country burning awake on the back of his hand. And at the bottom of him, below the sums and the noticing, below even the place that answered to wanting, a door had opened that would never close, and through it he could feel the whole vast living weight of Hogwarts, and Hogwarts could feel him. Well, said Edric from his frame, and his painted voice had gone strange and thick, there it is. 1,000 years I've waited to see that, and I'd half stopped believing I would. He cleared a throat he did not have. It's done, lad, you're crowned awake, now hold on to your seat, because somewhere out there, all at once, a great many people just found out you exist. In the deepest vault hall of Gringotts, where the floor was older than the bank and the bank was older than the ministry, and the ministry liked to forget both those things, a goblin named Scarnock was counting a thing that could not be counted, which was the only kind of counting Scarnock respected. He was old even by the measure of goblins, which is a measure that makes wizards look like mayflies, and he was keeper of the dormant accounts, which was the least glamorous and most sacred office in the bank, because the dormant accounts were the ones no living hand had claimed, the seats and vaults and titles whose owners had died out or vanished or never come at all, and a bank that forgets its dormant accounts is a bank that has forgotten what a bank is for. Scarnock did not forget. Scarnock had not forgotten anything in 400 years. It was, as far as he was concerned, the main thing he was good at, and a goblin had to be good at something. The dormant hall was lit by no fire, because fire was for warmth and Scarnock had no use for warmth, and it was lined floor to vaulted ceiling with ledgers, 10,000 of them, each chained to its shelf, each sealed with the blood wax of a house gone quiet, and at the heart of the hall, on a plinth of black stone, stood the oldest ledger of them all. It was bound in dragon hide gone gray with age, and its lock was a thing of goblin silver that no goblin now living knew how to open, and it had a name, and the name was burned into its cover in letters that predated the bank, the account of the castle. It had not been opened in 700 years. The last hand to hold its key had been a wizard whose line had ended in the plague years, an heir of a thin and failing branch, and when his line ended the account had sealed itself and gone dormant, and 7 centuries of keepers had dusted it and guarded it and never once seen it stir, because the account of the castle was the dormant account of dormant accounts, the seat of the one institution in magical Britain that no living person owned, Hogwarts itself. The wealth of it, the titles of it. The Wisengamot seat that had gone empty so long that the empty chair had become a tradition, and the tradition had become furniture. The right, written in the founding charters, in a hand that hissed, and a hand that flowed, and a hand that blazed, and a hand that warmed, to speak for the castle, to draw on its accounts, to command its deepest magic, and to sit, by ancient right, above the headmaster who merely kept it. Scarnock was dusting it. He dusted it every 9 days with a cloth of spun nothing, because it was beneath his office to let any other hand touch the account, and because in 400 years the dusting of it had become the closest thing a goblin who did not pray had to prayer. The account opened under his hand. It did not open the way a book opens. It opened the way a vault opens, the way a thing opens that has decided after 700 years that the time has come. The goblin silver lock turned itself, with a sound like a coin dropped into a deep well, and the gray dragonhide cover lifted, and the pages within, blank for 7 centuries, every one of them blank, began to fill. They filled from the top, line by line, in fresh wet ink that glowed gray gold, and the ink wrote a name, and Scarnock, the keeper of dormant accounts, who had not been surprised by anything in 400 years, leaned over the account of the castle and read the name as it was written and felt, somewhere under the cold flat country of his goblin heart, a thing he had genuinely thought he was too old to feel. Potter, the account wrote in gray gold fire, Harry James, heir of the 4 crown woken. Seat claimed, and then below it, line after line after line, the account began to do what it had not done in 700 years, which was to reckon. It tallied the wealth of 1,000 years that no hand had drawn on. It listed the titles, dormant and dusty and suddenly, blazingly owned. It noted the Wisengamot seat, the empty chair, the furniture, and it marked the chair, for the first time since the plague years, as held. Skarnak stood very still in the dark of the dormant hall and watched the oldest account in the bank wake up around a name he had never heard, and his old mind, which forgot nothing, did three things in quick and cold succession. It noted that the law was the law, and that the account had spoken, and that goblin law did not care whether the heir was a king or a kitchen boy, only whether the claim was true, and the account did not lie. The account had never lied. The account was the truest thing in a bank built on the principle that truth was the only thing worth guarding. So the claim was true. Harry James Potter, whoever he was the heir of Hogwarts, and Gringotts, which had held the account in trust for 700 years against exactly this day, owed him the duty it had owed no living person in all that time. It noted, second, that a great many wizards were going to want this not to be true, and that some of them were going to be powerful, and that powerful wizards who want a true thing to be false have a way of becoming dangerous to whoever holds the proof, and that the proof was currently sitting on a plinth in Skarnak's own hall, which made the hall, as of this moment, the most dangerous room in Britain. And it noted, third and last and coldest, that the heir was clearly a child, Harry James, crown woken. No grown heir takes 700 years to arrive, and then arrives all at once on an idle Tuesday. Only a child could have done this, blundered into the deepest magic in the country and been crowned by it before he was old enough to know what crowns cost. A child, alone, with the oldest claim in Britain blazing over his head like a struck match in a dark full of powder. Skarnak closed the account of the castle, gently, because one did not slam a thing 700 years asleep, and he turned, and he walked the long cold length of the dormant hall toward the stairs that led up to the living bank, moving faster than a goblin of his age had any business moving, because there were forms to be filed and a director to be woken and an heir to be found and protected, the bank's own honor now staked on a child it had never met, and because Skarnak, keeper of dormant accounts, who had not hurried for anything in 400 years, had just understood that he was, in all probability, not the only one in Britain who had felt the account wake, and that the others would not be coming to protect. The director of Gringotts was woken 3 minutes later, which had not happened in the lifetime of any goblin then drawing breath, and the waking was managed by Skarnak in person, because a thing this old could be entrusted to no messenger. Ragnarok the director was younger than Skarnak by a century and harder than him by a great deal, and he listened to the keeper of dormant accounts in the cold light of the upper counting house with his clawed hands flat on the iron table and his face giving away precisely nothing, which was the face a director was paid to wear. When Skarnak had finished, Ragnarok was quiet for the length of 3 breaths, and then he asked the only question that mattered, which was a question about law. Is the claim clean? The claim is the account's own writing, said Skarnak. It is cleaner than any claim made by any living wizard in this bank. It was not sworn, not purchased, not inherited through a contested will. It was recognized, director, by the deep magic itself, which answers to no forgery and cannot be bribed. The account of the castle does not make mistakes. In 700 years it has made none. The heir is real, the claim is true, and the duty is ours. A child, said Ragnarok, a child. The director's jaw worked once, the only thing about him that moved. He was thinking Skarnak knew of the same 3 things Skarnak had thought of in the dormant hall in the same cold order, because they had been forged in the same forge and reckoned by the same arithmetic. The claim was true, powerful men would want it false, and the proof was a child who could be reached. You understand what we are now bound to, Ragnarok said. It was not a question. The account is a trust. We have held it 7 centuries against a claimant. The claimant has come. By the oldest law of this bank, the law that is older than this bank, we owe the heir of the castle the full protection of Gringotts, his vaults, his council, his person. If a wizard lays a hand on this child to take what the account has given him, that wizard has not robbed a boy. He has robbed us. He has broken the trust of the bank, and the bank does not forgive a broken trust, not in 700 years, not in 7,000. I understand it, director. I filed the bond myself an hour ago, the moment the ink dried. It is done. It cannot be undone. We are the heir's bank now, and his shield, whether he wishes it or no, and whether he knows we exist or no. Then send an emissary, said Ragnarok, rising, and the cold of him filled the counting house. One of ours. Not a letter. Letters are intercepted. Letters are read by old men in towers. Send a goblin with the seal to find this child before the wizards do, and to tell him, in plain words, a child can hold, that he has a bank, and that his bank keeps its trusts, and that he is not, whatever else the next weeks teach him, alone. He looked at Skarnak, and something passed between the 2 oldest goblins in Britain that no wizard would ever have read as feeling, because no wizard ever understood that to a goblin a kept trust was feeling, the deepest there was. Go yourself. You found him, you keep him, and Skarnak, be quick. We are not the only ones who can count, and the others have been counting on this for longer than we have. In the round office at the top of the tower, Albus Dumbledore felt it too. He had been ready for it for 9 days, which was the only reason it did not knock him from his chair. He had spent those 9 days in quiet and careful preparation, telling no one, because telling people was how a careful thing became an uncontrolled thing, and Albus Dumbledore had spent a long life learning that the only safe place for a dangerous truth was inside his own head. He had studied the turning instrument. He had walked the perimeter of his knowledge of the deep wards, which was wide and deep, and he was forced to admit insufficient. He had concluded that a child in Surrey had done the impossible, and he had decided, with the heavy and genuine reluctance of a man who loved the child in question without ever having met him, that the impossible would have to be managed. When the crown woke, every silver instrument in the office woke with it. They did not ring one note now. They shrieked, all of them, 100 delicate mechanisms crying out at once that the deepest magic of Hogwarts had risen to full waking power and bound itself, fully and irrevocably, and beyond any headmaster's reach, to a single living hand. The portraits jolted awake in their frames. The fire flared green and then white. And the old gray-gold instrument on the highest shelf, the one that had started it all, rose an inch off its base and hung in the air, blazing, ringing its one clear note now at the top of its voice, a herald that had waited 1,000 years to announce a coronation, and would not be quieted until it had announced it to the very stones. Dumbledore rose. He crossed to the window and looked out over the dark grounds, the lake, the forest, the whole sleeping shape of the castle he had kept for 50 years and never, he understood now, truly owned, and his face in the white light of the shrieking instruments was not the face the world knew. The twinkle was gone, the grandfather was gone. Stood at the window was the wizard who had defeated Grindelwald and declined to rule, the strategist who arranged the safety of the world from behind a desk of lemon drops, and that strategist was doing arithmetic. A child held the deep magic of Hogwarts, the prophecy child, Lily's son, the child he had placed in Surrey precisely because Surrey was nowhere, because nowhere was safe, because a weapon kept in nowhere stays sharp and stays hidden and stays, above all, his to wield when the hour came. And now nowhere had a crown in it, and the crown was a beacon, and the beacon would call every hand in Britain to a house Dumbledore had spent 6 years making invisible. Phineas, he said without turning. In its frame on the wall, the portrait of a sharp-faced former headmaster opened one eye. I felt it, said Phineas Nigellus Black sourly. I should think the dead in their graves felt it. What in the name of the founders have you let happen, Dumbledore? 700 years that account slept, and you let a child. I let nothing happen, said Dumbledore, and there was iron under the mildness now, plainly, the way there is rock under a quiet field. Which is precisely the problem. Go to your other portrait, the one in the headmaster's house at Grimmauld Place, and from there to any frame you can reach near Surrey. I want eyes. I want to know what manner of child has just inherited the oldest power in this country, and I want to reach him before anyone else does. He paused, and Phineas, quietly, if the bank felt this and they will have, then the bank will move, and the bank does not love me. And if the bank felt it, then so did older and hungrier things, and they will move faster because they have less to lose and more to want. He turned from the window. The instruments shrieked on. And Albus Dumbledore, who had spent his whole life being right and being kind and being certain that the two were the same thing, went to his desk and began, with steady hands and a heavy heart and the very best of intentions, to plan how he would take a crowned king of 6 and make of him, gently, lovingly, and entirely without the king's consent, exactly the champion the world was going to need. There was a third house that felt the crown wake, and in that house no instrument shrieked, because the instrument in that house had been listening for this for 200 years, and it did not shriek when its long patience was rewarded. It sang. Vane Hall stood on a hill in the cold north of the country, on a place where 3 ley lines crossed, and it had stood there longer than the village that had once surrounded it, and was now only a churchyard and a name. The hall was dark stone and narrow windows and a single high tower, and in the tower, in a room that no servant was permitted to enter and no servant wished to, Lord Cassius Vane sat before the thing his family had kept and tended and fed for 7 generations, and listened to it sing. It was called the Tithe Stone. It was a wedge of gray gold rock the size of a man's 2 fists, and it sat on a stand of black iron, and a single thread of light ran out of it and up through the ceiling and away to the south, a thread the color of nothing, the color of a thing that drinks, and it had hung there, faint and patient, for 200 years. Ever since Cassius Vane's ancestor had walked into the deepest place under Hogwarts disguised as a stonemason, and pressed a sliver of this very stone into the living weave of the castle's deep magic, and walked out again with no one the wiser, and gone home to die rich and quiet and unhung. The sliver in the castle drank, the tithe stone in the tower received. Drop by drop, thread by thread, for 200 years, the deepest magic of Hogwarts had run north up that thread of nothing and pooled in a stone in a tower, and the veins had grown strange and strong and long-lived on the tithe of it, and they had waited because the founder's weave was vast and even a 200-year theft had taken only the smallest measure of it. the way a slow leak takes a reservoir, and the veins were patient. The veins were always patient. The veins had built their whole house on the principle that the patient thief outlives the watchful guard, but the tithe stone had never sung before. It had hummed, low and steady, the sound of a thing drinking. Tonight it sang, high and bright and terrible, and Cassius Vane, who was a tall man, gray before his time and colder than his years, sat before it with his long hands folded and understood what the singing meant because his father had told him, and his father's father had told his father, in the long line of telling that was the only inheritance the Vanes truly valued. The stone sang when the crown woke. The stone sang when, after 1,000 years, the deep magic of Hogwarts finally chose an heir and bound itself to a living hand and became, for the first time in all those centuries, reachable. Because a sleeping crown could not be stolen. A sleeping crown answered to no one, and a thing that answers to no one cannot be commanded, and a thing that cannot be commanded cannot be taken. But a woken crown answered to a hand, and a hand could be held, and a hand could be broken. And a hand could, with the right ritual and the right thread of nothing and 200 years of stolen power pooled in a stone, be made to pour everything it held into a vessel of someone else's choosing. The founders had locked the deep magic away from thieves by making it answer only to an heir who came to keep. They had not imagined a thief patient enough to wait 1,000 years for the heir to arrive, and then simply take the heir. "Here you are," said Cassius Vane softly to the singing stone, to the thread of nothing, to the child somewhere at the far end of it who had just made himself the single most valuable and most stealable thing in Britain. He rose. He was very tall in the dark of the tower, and the gray-gold light of the stone lay along the planes of his cold face and made it older. 7 generations my house has fed this stone and waited for you to wake, and you have woken, and you do not even know what you are, do you? A child, the account will say a child. His mouth moved. Children are so much easier to hold than kings. He went to the window of the tower and looked south, down the thread of nothing, toward a house in Surrey he did not yet know the address of and would know within the week, because a man who can afford patience can afford the people who end it. "Find him," Cassius Vane said to the dark, to the men who served him, and asked no questions, because the wages of asking no questions were very good indeed. "Before the old man finds him, before the goblins find him, find the heir and bring him to me and bring him whole, because a cracked vessel pours crooked." The thread of nothing sang on, north out of the castle, into the stone, into the long cold patience of a house that had been stealing Hogwarts one drop at a time for 200 years and was now at last ready to take it all at once. "We have waited 7 generations, said the last and worst of the Vanes. "We can wait a week more." Far to the south, in the heart of the oldest house in the magical world, Harry Potter sat down on the cold slate of the first hall because his legs had stopped agreeing to hold him, and looked at the crown burning awake on the back of his hand, and felt through the door at the bottom of him that would never close again, the whole vast living weight of the castle settle around him like a cloak too large for a child to wear and far too warm to take off. "I can feel it," he said. His voice came out smaller than the moment, all of it, the fire, the books, the water with the bones, and the black thread. "I can feel the black thread now like it's stuck in me." He looked up at Edric's frame, and the thing at the bottom of him that he had only ever let himself name once moved, and he named it now quietly because it was true, and the truth was the only tool he had ever been allowed to keep. "Edric, I'm frightened." "Good," said Edric, and there was no unkindness in it, only the steady grim love of an old dead castellan for the child the stone had finally, after 1,000 years, sent him. "Frightened is correct. It is the answer that fits the question. Only fools and Vanes feel anything else tonight." He came as close to the front of his frame as the paint allowed. "Listen to me now, heir, because the grace is gone and the hunt has started, and from here it is all running. 3 powers felt you wake tonight, and I'd stake my frame on it being 3. One keeps a bank and owes you a duty it has owed no living soul in 7 centuries, and that one may yet be a friend, if a cold one. One keeps this castle and loves you and will try to own you, and that one is the hardest, because his hands are gentle. And one," the old eyes went flat and far away, remembering something paint should not be able to remember, "one has been drinking this castle's blood for 200 years through that very thread you feel stuck in you, and that one does not want to own you or protect you. That one wants to open you like a tap and pour you into a stone, and that one, Harry, will be the fastest, because that one has been waiting the longest." Then the hall let him go, and Harry fell down the line into his own sleeping body, and came up out of sleep into the gray first light of the cupboard under the stairs, 4 feet by 3, with a crown on his hand he could not put away. It would not sink. He lay on the thin mattress and held his right hand up in the dark and watched the 4-quartered shield glow faint gray gold under his skin. The lion, the eagle, the badger, the serpent, slow and steady and awake, and it did not fade when he willed it to, and it did not fade when he pressed his other hand over it, and he understood that Edric had told him the truth, that there was no putting it back to sleep. That he was going to do the eggs this morning with the oldest power in Britain shining quietly under the skin of the hand that cracked them. He was cold. The cupboard was always cold in the gray hour before Aunt Petunia woke, a damp under the stairs cold that got into the bones and stayed, and Harry had spent 6 years not minding it because minding a thing you cannot change is a way of being hurt twice. He pulled the thin blanket up and waited for the cold as he always waited for it. The cold did not come, warmth came instead. It came up through the floor of the cupboard, through the thin mattress, through the blanket, low and golden and patient, and it smelled faintly under the dust and the old rubber of wood smoke and bread, of a hearth banked low in a great kitchen, and Harry lay very still in the warmth of a fire that was burning 1,000 years away and 1,000 feet down, and understood that it had come up the line to find him. Helga's fire. The fire someone had kept lit through 10 centuries of empty kitchen on the chance that one day a frightened child would come home cold. It had found the cold child. It had reached all the way up the thread into a cupboard in Surrey to lie down beside him like a warm animal, asking nothing, only keeping the cold off because that was what it was for, because that was the whole of what it had ever been for. Harry put his marked hand flat against the warm floor of the cupboard, and the crown glowed and the warmth pulsed up to meet it, soft, 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 and he lay in the dark under the stairs with a fire from the heart of the oldest house in the world keeping him warm, and the thing at the bottom of him that he had named once and would not name again sat very quiet, and was for a little while before the knock came in the eggs and the long gray day, almost the opposite of afraid. The knock came. "Up," said Aunt Petunia through the slats and rapped twice. "Up, up the eggs." Harry closed his marked hand into a fist, the way Edric had taught him, and the glow of the crown dimmed under the pressure to a banked ember, hidden but not gone, never gone again, and he pushed off the blanket and put his bare feet on the warm floor and went out to crack eggs one-handed against the rim of the bowl in a kitchen full of people who would spend the whole day looking at the Harry they expected, who could not crack an egg without leaving half the shell, and who did not, would never, glow. The crown stayed banked in his fist all morning. He kept it there with a corner of his attention the whole time, the way you keep a finger on a place that hurts, except this did not hurt. This was the opposite of the cupboard. This was the one thing in the whole flat gray house that was his, burning quietly under his skin while he did the eggs and the toast in the front beds, and not Aunt Petunia nor Uncle Vernon nor Dudley nor any of the long gray weight of number 4 knew it was there, and that was the whole of the lesson, and it would keep him alive for years if he let it be the cupboard and carry the fire inside it where no one thinks to look. Far to the north, in the cold tower of Vane Hall, a stone the color of stolen gold sang on into the dawn, and would not stop singing until it had what it had waited 7 generations to drink. And in a bank under London, a goblin pulled on a traveling cloak the color of slate and took up a seal 700 years unused, and set out south. And in a tower in the north of Scotland, an old man with a long white beard folded a letter he would not send, because letters were read by old men in towers, and reached instead for his own traveling cloak, the color of a kingfisher, and turned his kind and terrible face toward Surrey. 3 of them all at once, turning toward a house whose calendar had a blank square where a boy's birthday should be. And Harry did the eggs and carried the fire and waited, banked and hidden and 6 years old, for the first of them to knock. Chapter 3 and Chapter 4. Those who count the stones, the first of them to find him was the goblin, and he found Harry exactly where Harry kept the one part of his life that was his, which was the small private nowhere in the corner where the fence of number 4 met the fence of number 6. It was the second morning after the crown woke. Harry had been sent to the back beds this time, which suited him, because the back beds let him kneel in the corner the windows could not see, and he had been kneeling there with his marked hand pressed flat against the cold earth, doing the thing he had taught himself the night before, which was listening. Through the crown, the castle was always a little present now, a warmth at the edge of him, a sense of vast slow breathing far away and far down, and Harry had discovered that if he was very quiet he could feel the line itself, the great taut humming thread running away north under the clay. He was listening down the line, the way you put a shell to your ear, when a voice that was not down the line at all spoke from about 3 feet to his left. "You should not do that out of doors," said the voice. Anyone with the right ear could follow the listening back to the listener. "You are loud, Heir. You have been crowned 2 days, and you are the loudest thing in the home counties." Harry did not jump because the cupboard had trained the jump out of him years ago. He turned his head slowly and looked. A goblin was standing in the corner of the garden in the small private nowhere, where no goblin had any business being. He was old and gray-skinned and not much taller than Harry himself, and he wore a traveling cloak the color of slate over clothes cut close and plain, and he carried no wand, which Harry noticed first, because everyone in the stories carried a wand, and this person carried instead a flat case of black iron under one arm and an expression of complete and patient disinterest, the expression of a creature who has counted a great many things and found most of them wanting. "You're not a person," Harry said. It was not rudeness, it was Data said aloud as he said Data aloud. "I mean you're a person, but not a human one. You came without a wand, and you came without making a sound, and you came straight to the one corner of the garden nobody can see. So you're something that already knew about the corner, which means you've been watching, which means you're not the first of them." The goblin looked at him for a long moment. "My name is Skarnock," he said. "I am keeper of the dormant accounts of Gringotts, which is the bank which you do not yet know you have. I am 411 years old, and I have been keeper for most of them, and in all that time I have explained the nature of inheritance to a great many wizards, most of them grown, most of them clever, and not one of them has ever on first meeting reasoned their way to which means you're not the first of them before I had finished saying my own name." He shifted the iron case under his arm. "The account said you were a child. The account did not say you were going to be tiresome. Sit down, Heir. I have come a long way, and I have a great deal to tell you, and not, I think, a great deal of time before the second of them arrives, and the second of them is worse than me." So Harry sat cross-legged in the cold earth of the corner, and the goblin sat across from him with the iron case on his knees, and the begonias screened them from the house, and Skarnock of Gringotts began to teach Harry the thing that Edric could not, which was not the magic of the inheritance but the law of it, the cold hard architecture of what it meant to own a thing in the world above the line. "You believe, I expect," said Skarnock, "that a crown is a kind of power. It is. But that is the least of what it is, and the least dangerous. A crown is also a kind of property, and property is the thing wizards will kill for long after they have forgotten how to want power for its own sake. Listen to me. 2 days ago a thing happened in my bank that has not happened in 700 years. An account woke. The oldest account we keep, the account of the castle, the seat of Hogwarts itself, dormant since the last thin heir of the old line died in the plague years. It woke and it wrote a name, and the name was yours." He opened the iron case. Inside, on black velvet, lay a single object, a ring heavy, old, of dull grey gold metal, with a flat face on which was cut the four-quartered shield, the lion and the eagle and the badger and the serpent. "This is the heir's seal. It is yours. It has been yours in law from the hour the account wrote your name, and there is not a wizard alive who can take it from you, because no wizard alive granted it. The deep magic granted it. The bank only keeps the record." Harry looked at the ring. He did not reach for it. He had learned at number 4 that the things people held out to you were the things they wanted you to take, and the wanting was always the important part. "What does it cost?" he said. Skarnock went very still, and then he did a thing that Harry would only much later learn a goblin almost never did with a wizard, which was that he smiled, a thin grey smile with too many teeth in it, and it was not unkind. "Nothing," he said. "That is the part you will not believe, and you are right not to believe it easily, so I will tell you exactly how it works, and you will check the arithmetic yourself, because you are clearly the sort that checks. The seal costs you nothing because it is already yours. The bank costs you nothing because the bank does not work for you, the bank works for the trust. 700 years we held the account against a claimant. You are the claimant. The oldest law of Gringotts, which is older than Gringotts, we now owe you the full protection of the bank, your vaults, your council, and your person, not because we are kind, ere we are not kind, but because a kept trust is the only thing a goblin holds sacred, and you are our kept trust now, and a wizard who lays a hand on you to take what is yours has not robbed a child, he has robbed us, and we do not forgive a theft. Not in 700 years, not ever." He tilted his grey head. "So the ring costs you nothing, but it is not free. Do you understand the difference?" Harry thought about it. "Costing nothing and being free aren't the same thing," he said slowly. "If it costs nothing, that just means I don't pay, but it's not free because if I wear it, things happen, people know what I am. It changes what I am to everyone who sees it. That's not a cost I pay you, it's a cost the world makes me pay just for being it." He looked up. "That's why my birthday's a blank square, isn't it? Somebody decided a long time ago it was safer if the world didn't know what I was, and this ring is the opposite of a blank square." The goblin was quiet for a moment. "The account said a child," he said almost to himself. "The account is going to owe me an apology." He lifted the ring out of the case and held it out, flat on his grey palm, not pressing, not wanting, simply offering. "You will not wear it, not yet. You are 6 and you live in a cupboard, and a ring that announces the heir of Hogwarts is the last thing your hand should be carrying where the wrong eyes can see. But take it and keep it hidden and learn what it is, because there will come an hour soon, I think, sooner than any of us would like, when you will need to prove what you are to people who will be very motivated to pretend you are not. And on that hour the seal of the bank on your finger will be worth more than any wand. Take it, Heir. The bank keeps its trusts, let the bank keep you." Harry took the ring. It was heavier than it looked and warm, the same banked warmth as the crown under his skin, and when his fingers closed around it the four-quartered shield on the back of his hand glowed once, soft in answer, recognizing its own. He put the ring deep in the pocket of his too large trousers, the pocket with no hole, the one he kept the things in that were his. "Thank you," he said. It came out plain and true. "Nobody's given me anything before, not without it being a trap." He looked at the goblin. "Is it a trap?" "Everything is a trap," said Skarnock, closing the iron case and rising to a creature small enough. "That is not cruelty, it is geometry. But this one is a trap with you inside it, and the bank's whole honor standing at the door, and the bank's honor is the heaviest door in Britain. Keep the ring, keep your listening indoors. And keep above all your own counsel, because the second of them is nearly here. I can feel him on the line, an old and gentle and terrible weight coming down out of the north, and he will be kinder to you than I have been, and you must trust him a great deal less. Skarnock pulled his slate cloak about him. When you need the bank, press the seal to any silver and say my name. I will come, or one of mine will. We do not abandon a trust. He paused, and the gray eyes moved over the thin child in the cold corner, the borrowed clothes, the dirt, the blank square life of him. Helga's fire reached you the first night, he said. It was not a question. We felt it go down the line. In 700 years, the deep magic has reached up to warm exactly no one. It reached up to warm you. The thin gray smile came and went. Whatever else the next weeks teach you, Heir, hold on to that. The castle did not only crown you, it likes you. That is rarer than the crown. And the goblin stepped back into the corner the windows could not see, and was, between one of Harry's blinks and the next, simply not there, and Harry was alone in the back beds with a ring in his hidden pocket and a warmth on his hand and the cold certain knowledge that the second of them was coming and would be kind and must not be trusted. The second of them came that afternoon. He came to the front door, which surprised Harry, who had expected the kind terrible wait on the line to arrive the way the goblin had arrived, sideways and silent, and into the part of the world that nobody watched. Instead, the doorbell rang, the ordinary doorbell of number 4 Privet Drive, and Aunt Petunia answered it drying her hands, and there was a silence on the doorstep of exactly the wrong length, and then Aunt Petunia's voice came back down the hall, pitched high and strange, the voice she used for the vicar and for trouble. "Vernon," she called. "Vernon, it's for you'd better come." Harry was in the kitchen, doing the lunch things. He went very still over the sink, and through the crown, through the door at the bottom of him that would never close. He felt the weight come over the threshold of the house and understood at once that Edric had not exaggerated, that this was a different order of thing entirely from the goblin, that where Skarnock had been a cold, flat, clever pressure, this was an ocean, vast and warm and patient and old, filling the small, mean hall of number for the way the sea fills a rock pool, gently, completely. "Leaving nothing untouched, Petunia," said a voice from the hall, warm as wood smoke, courteous as a king. "How very long it has been. You have not changed at all, which I mean entirely as a kindness, and this must be Vernon. What a fine, solid house you keep. I have always thought a solid house says a great deal about the people in it." Harry dried his hands and went to the kitchen doorway and looked. The visitor filled the hall the way the wait filled the line. He was tall and very old, with a beard of white that fell past his belt, and half-moon spectacles, and robes of a blue so deep it was nearly the color of the evening sky, and over one arm a traveling cloak the color of a kingfisher, and he was smiling down at Uncle Vernon, who had gone the purple-gray of a man whose worst memory has walked in the front door, and Aunt Petunia, who had her back against the wall and her hand at her throat. And the smile was warm, and the eyes above it twinkled, and the whole of him radiated a grandfatherly kindness so complete and so practiced that Harry, who had spent 6 years learning to read the things people did not say, felt the danger of it before he had taken a full step into the hall. Because under the kindness, threaded all the way through it the way the black wound was threaded through the golden weave, was the thing Edric had named certainty. This was a person who was certain he was right, and certainty that complete did not bend, and a kindness that did not bend was not a kindness at all. It was a current, and a current would carry you wherever it was already going, no matter how warmly it held you while it did. The twinkling eyes found Harry in the kitchen doorway, and the smile deepened and became, if anything, even kinder. "And here he is," said Albus Dumbledore very softly, and for just a moment before the warmth flooded back in to cover it, something else moved behind the half-moon spectacles, something hungry and astonished and afraid, the look of a man who has come a long way on a guess and found the guess was true and far larger than he feared. "Hello, Harry, my name is Professor Dumbledore. I knew your mother and your father a long time ago, and I have come a very long way to talk to you. Will you walk with me a little, just in the garden? Your aunt and uncle will not mind." Aunt Petunia's mouth opened. Dumbledore turned the twinkle on her, and whatever she had been going to say folded up and went away, and she nodded jerkily, and Harry understood that the current had decided, and that the only question left was whether Harry would let it carry him or learn, right now in the next 60 seconds, how to stand in a current and not be moved. "Tell the truth," Edric had said. "But choose which truth." "All right," said Harry. They walked in the garden. Dumbledore went slowly, his hands folded behind his back, looking with apparent delight at Aunt Petunia's begonias in the trampled corner and the neat dull rose. And he talked gently about nothing, about the weather and the roses and the long drive down. And all the while Harry felt the vast warm ocean of him pressing very softly at the edges of Harry's mind, not breaking in, not yet, only leaning, testing, the way you test ice with the toe of a boot before you trust it with your weight. He was trying to read him. Harry knew it, as he knew when Aunt Petunia was about to find fault, by the quality of the attention. Dumbledore was reaching for the inside of Harry's head with something Harry had no name for, a soft, warm, clever pressure, looking for the thing he had come all this way to confirm, looking for the crown. And the crown answered. Harry did not tell it to, he would not have known how. But the deep magic of Hogwarts had bound itself to its heir, and it knew its heir was being reached for by the hand that held the castle's outer keys, the hand that had tied the other end of his mother's thread to the founder's stone, and the deep magic rose up at the bottom of Harry like a tide and closed over him. And where Dumbledore's soft, warm, clever pressure had been finding the edges of a 6-year-old's open mind, it found instead a wall of gray gold stone 1,000 years thick, seamless, ancient. Entirely shut, Harry felt the great ocean of the old wizard pull back. He felt the astonishment in it, sharp and quickly hidden. And he understood with the cold clarity that came at the bottom of bad moments that he had just shown Dumbledore something that the wall had told the old wizard more than an open mind ever could have, that the very fact of the wall was a confession. I am crowned, and the castle defends me even from you. So Harry did the only thing left. He covered the wall with a boy. He looked up at Dumbledore with the wide, blank face he had spent 6 years perfecting, the face that gave Aunt Petunia nothing to find fault with, and he said in a child's plain voice, "You said you knew my mum and dad." The pressure withdrew entirely. Dumbledore looked down at him, and the twinkle was back, full and warm, and only Harry, who read the things people did not say, saw the recalculation going on behind it, vast and quiet and quick. "I did," said Dumbledore. "They were very brave and very good, and they loved you more than anything in this world, and they died protecting you. I am sorry that no one has told you that before. I am sorry about a great many things, Harry." And the terrible part Harry understood was that this was true, every word of it, that the current genuinely grieved, that the kindness was real, and that none of it would stop the current for one instant from carrying Harry exactly where it had already decided he would go. "Harry, I think you're not entirely safe here. I think there are things happening around you and to you that no one has explained and that frighten you, and I think I can help. I would like to take you somewhere safe, somewhere I can look after you properly and teach you and keep you from the people who might wish to use you. Would you like that, to be somewhere safe with someone who understands?" It was the kindest trap Harry had ever been offered, and it was a trap, and the worst of it, the part that made it harder than any of Dudley's fists, was that part of Harry, the cold, tired part that had spent 6 years in a cupboard, wanted very badly to say yes. "Tell the truth, choose which truth." "My mum and dad died protecting me," Harry said slowly, "and you knew them, and you came a long way, and you want to take me somewhere safe and teach me." He looked up at the vast, kind old face. "But you knew where I was the whole time. You said you knew my mum and dad, and you came a long way. So you knew all these years that I was here in the cupboard with the blank square, and you didn't come, not for my birthday, not once, you only came now." He let it land, plain and true and chosen. "So something changed, not me being unsafe. I've always been unsafe. Something changed 2 days ago, and now you've come. I'm only 6, but I can count, Professor. What changed 2 days ago?" The garden was very quiet. A lawnmower started and stopped somewhere over the fence. Albus Dumbledore looked down at the thin child in the borrowed clothes for a long moment, and the twinkle did not waver, and the kindness did not crack. But something behind both of them went very still and very old and very careful. The stillness of a master who has sat down to a game expecting a child across the board and found, instead, another master, far smaller, far stranger, and entirely unwilling to be moved. "What a great many questions you have," said Dumbledore at last, gently, fondly, and with underneath the faintest cold thread of something that in a lesser man would have been fear. "You are quite right, of course. You are right about all of it. Something did change 2 days ago, and I will tell you what in time when you are ready, when we know each other better. For now," and he reached slowly into a pocket of the deep blue robes, and Harry's whole body went taut, and the crown banked hot in his hidden fist. "For now I have brought you a sweet. Sherbet lemon. They are very good. Old men's sweets, I'm afraid, but I am a very old man." He held it out on his palm, the way the goblin had held out the ring, not pressing, not wanting, and the parallel was so exact that Harry almost laughed, because here was the second one, doing the same thing as the first, holding out a gift that cost nothing and was not free. "I will go now, Harry. I will not take you anywhere you do not wish to go. You have my word, and my word is the one thing in this world I have always kept, but I will come back. When I come back, I hope you will trust me a little more than you do today, because the truth, Harry, the truth that frightens me, is that you are going to need someone you can trust very badly and very soon, and there are not many in this country worthy of it, and I have spent a long life trying to be one of the few." He set the sweet down on the garden wall, since Harry had not taken it. "Be careful who you let close. Be careful of anyone who comes offering you what you most want, even me. The twinkle, especially me." And he turned and walked back through the house and was gone, and Harry stood alone in the garden with a ring in one pocket and a sherbet lemon on the wall, and the cold understanding that he had won the only round he was strong enough to win, which was the round where he refused to be carried, and that the current had merely paused and was already, somewhere out of sight, finding another way around. Word of the thing got out, as words do, because the one place in Britain less able to keep a secret than the ministry was the part of the ministry that thought it could. A clerk in the Department of Magical Inheritance noticed, 4 days after the crown woke, that the dormant Wisengamot seat tied to the office of Hogwarts, the empty chair that had been empty so long it had stopped being a question, had been quietly reclassified in the bank's filings from vacant to held, and the clerk, who was bored and underpaid and owed a favor, mentioned it over a drink to a man who owed a different favor to Lucius Malfoy. And within the week, the most ambitious lord on the board of governors of Hogwarts School knew three things: that the Hogwarts seat was no longer empty, that the bank would not say who held it, and that a thing the bank would not name was, in Lucius Malfoy's long and profitable experience, precisely the kind of thing worth owning. "An heir," said Lucius Malfoy in the cold green drawing-room of his manor, turning his cane in his pale hands. "After 700 years, how extraordinarily inconvenient." Across from him sat a heavy-set man with a ministry pin and a nervous mouth, who had come to sell what he knew and was beginning to suspect he had badly underpriced it. "And the bank will not name him. The bank won't name anyone, my lord, you know goblins, but the seat's held, that's certain, the filing's real, I've seen it. Somewhere in Britain there's a person who can walk into the Wisengamot and sit in the Hogwarts chair and vote it and speak for the school and draw on its accounts. Whoever they are, whatever they are." "Whatever they are," Lucius repeated softly, and his pale eyes went distant and calculating, because a vote was a vote and a seat was a seat, and the Board of Governors had spent 40 years quietly ensuring that the running of Hogwarts answered to the right sort of people, and a new and unknown hand in the school's oldest chair was either the greatest threat to that arrangement in a generation or the greatest opportunity, depending entirely on who got to the hand first and what the hand could be made to want. "Find out who holds it," he said, discreetly, "before Dumbledore wraps them in cotton wool and the chance is gone. An heir who does not yet know his own worth, Mr. Avery, is the most purchasable thing in the world, and I do so enjoy a bargain." And so the third hunger woke, the political one, the smallest and the most numerous, the lords and the clerks and the favor traders, all of them turning in their slow, grubby way toward the same blank square in the same kitchen calendar that the goblin and the wizard had already found, and not one of them yet knew that they were the third hunger, and that the first two were already at the gate, and that the fourth, the worst, the patient one in the cold north, was no longer content to wait. Cassius Vane did not wait for the political hunger, and he did not wait for the bank, and he did not wait for the old wizard in the tower. He had waited 7 generations, and he had decided that the waiting was over, and so on the 9th night after the crown woke, while Harry slept in his cupboard with Helga's fire keeping the cold off and the air's ring under his pillow, 2 men came over the back fence of number 4 Privet Drive, into the small private nowhere in the corner that the windows could not see. They were not subtle men, but they did not need to be subtle, because Vane had not sent them to be subtle, he had sent them to be quick. They wore the long dark coats of men who did unpleasant work for patient money, and they carried no wands openly, because a wand drawn in a Muggle street was a ministry matter, and they carried instead, in gloved hands, the tools of their trade. A coil of silvered rope that bound magic as well as limbs, a cloth soaked in a draught that put children to sleep without waking the house, and between them a battered tin box with 3 holes punched in the lid, exactly the size, Harry would think later, of a thing meant to carry something small and living a long way without anyone hearing it cry. They came to the side of the house, to the low window of the cupboard under the stairs, and the larger of the 2 knelt and put his gloved hand against the glass and murmured the small dark word that turned a latch from the wrong side, because Vane's men had been told exactly which window, because a man who can afford patience can afford the clerk in the records office who knows which Surrey house has a child sleeping under the stairs. The latch turned, the window swung in, and the larger of them reached his gloved hand into the dark of the cupboard, toward the sleeping shape on the thin mattress, and the deep magic of Hogwarts, which had bound itself to its heir, which had reached up the line to warm him, which had closed over him 1,000 years thick to keep an old wizard's gentle pressure out, felt a hand that came not to keep but to take close around the wrist of the child it had crowned. The cupboard woke. It did not wake the way a person wakes. It woke the way a castle wakes. The gray-gold warmth that had been keeping the cold off Harry all those nights, the banked patient fire of Helga's hearth come up the line, flared white, and the small mean under-the-stairs space filled with light, and the gloved hand that had closed around Harry's wrist was no longer touching a sleeping child. It was touching the heir of the 4 founders, and the stone of the house itself, the ordinary Surrey brick that had stood inside the blood-ward Dumbledore set 6 years before. Remembered for one instant that it stood inside a ward anchored to the oldest binding in Britain, and it answered the only way stone answers, which is with weight. The larger one screamed. Harry came awake to the sound of it, to white light in that scream and a gloved hand crushing closed around his wrist and then wrenching away, and he saw in the flaring gray-gold light the intruder's arm pinned to the window frame by the brick itself. The wood and stone flowed closed over the wrist like water gone suddenly solid, holding and him hauling back against it with his whole weight and the brick not yielding, and his partner at the window with the tin box, a pale face gone slack, beginning to understand that the records office had not told them the one thing that mattered, which was what the child was. The crown blazed on the back of Harry's hand, full and bright, no longer banked, and the door at the bottom of him that would never close opened all the way, and the whole vast living weight of the castle poured up the line and into a cupboard 4 feet by 3, and Harry Potter, 6 years old, sat up on his thin mattress in a blaze of gray-gold light with a stranger's blood on his wrist and the deep magic of Hogwarts roaring awake all around him, and did the only thing his body knew how to do. Which was the thing it had done in the corner by the shed, the thing the bottom of him answered to. He wanted them gone. And the castle, 1,000 years old and 1,000 miles away and closer than his own skin, heard its heir and answered, and the men who had come to take the heir who came to keep were flung back over the fence of number 4 like leaves before a gale. The tin box with them, the silvered rope, the sleeping cloth, all of it, hurled out of the small private nowhere and into the empty road beyond, where they landed hard on the tarmac in a heap of dark coats and broken purpose, and the window swung shut. And the latch turned itself, and the brick flowed closed, and the gray-gold light banked slowly back down to the patient warmth of a kept fire, and Harry sat alone in his cupboard in the ringing dark with his wrist beginning to bruise where the glove had crushed it and the silence still humming around him, and understood completely and for the rest of his life that the hunt was no longer coming. It had come. He did not sleep again. He sat in the dark of the cupboard with his back against the warm brick and his bruised wrist cradled in his lap and the heir's ring pressed in his good hand, and when the shaking in his legs had quieted enough to trust them, he did the thing he had learned to do, which was to want the line and then let go of the wanting, and he went down to the only place in the world he was certain no one could follow. Edric was already at the front of his frame when Harry arrived in the first hall, and the old castellan took one look at him, at the bruise blackening on the thin wrist, at the way the child stood, and the dryness went entirely out of his painted face. "Show me," Edric said. Harry held up his wrist. The crown banked low on the back of his hand, an ember now, but the bruise was real, 4 marks where 4 gloved fingers had crushed, and Edric studied it the way a healer studies a wound, or the way a soldier studies the work of an enemy he knows. "Silvered rope," Harry said. "I saw it, and a cloth, a wet one, and a tin box with holes in the lid. They came in the cupboard window. One of them grabbed my wrist, and then the wall held him, and the fire came up white, and I wanted them gone, and the castle threw them into the road." He said it flatly, in order, the toaster voice, because saying a frightening thing in order was the only way he had ever found to make it stop being quite so frightening. "They knew which window, Edric. They knew which house and which window, and that I sleep under the stairs. Somebody told them." "Somebody sold them," Edric corrected, and his voice had gone to iron. "There's always a clerk, there's always a record. A wizarding child placed with muggle kin leaves a paper trail a foot deep in 3 ministry departments, and a man with patience and gold can buy any inch of it he likes." He came closer to the glass of his frame, the chain of office swinging dull at his chest. "The rope was silvered, you say, and a tin box with air holes built to carry something small and living a long way quiet. That is not robbery, lad. Robbers take the silver and run. That was a taking planned, paid for, and aimed at one thing only, which was you, whole and breathing and portable." The painted eyes were grim. "And there's only one hand in Britain that wants you whole and breathing and portable rather than simply dead. The same hand that has been drinking this castle 200 years through the thread you feel stuck in you. You felt them when they grabbed you, did you not? There was a moment when the hand closed on your wrist and you felt something you had felt before." Harry went still because it was true, and he had not until that moment let himself look at it. "The thread," he said slowly, "the black one, when he grabbed me, for a second it pulled, like the thread went tight, like the man who grabbed me was on the other end of it. Because he was," said Edric softly, "or his master was. The thread that drinks this castle and the hand that came for you tonight are the same house, Harry, the same patient, hungry, 200-year house, and now you have felt it with your own skin, so you will not be able to pretend it is far away or someone else's trouble. It is in your wall, it is in your wrist, it has a face and a name, and you will learn both before this is done." He drew a breath he did not need. "Tonight the castle saved you because tonight they came with hands, and hands are the one thing the deep magic knows how to throw. But listen to me, Heir, and hold this above everything else I have told you. He will not come with hands again. He is too old and too patient to make the same mistake twice. He has learned tonight exactly what you are, and a clever, cruel, patient man who learns what you are does not send rope and a tin box the second time. What does he send the second time?" "Paper," said Edric. "He sends paper. A crowned child is still a child, and a child-in-law belongs to a guardian, and a guardian can be challenged and petitioned and replaced by anyone with the gold to grease a court and the patience to wait for the seal to dry. The castle can throw a man through a window, Harry. The castle cannot throw a writ. The deepest magic in Britain is helpless against a single sheet of ministry parchment that says, in the proper words with the proper stamp, that you belong to someone new. And the someone new will walk in your front door in daylight, with the law on his side and no spell broken, and carry you off to a tower in the cold north, and not one stone of this castle will be permitted to lift a finger, because it will not be theft, it will be custody." The old voice dropped. "That is the next move. I would stake my frame on it. So you will keep that goblin's ring closer than your own skin, because the bank is the one power in this country that speaks the language of paper as fluently as he does, and when the paper comes, and it is coming, The bank may be the only wall left standing between you and a stone in the north that has been waiting 7 generations to drink a boy. Harry closed his bruised hand around the warm gray gold ring, and the crown glowed once in answer, and he looked up at the old dead castellan who had become, somewhere in these 9 nights, the closest thing to family he had ever had, and asked the only question that was left. Edric, what's in the tin box for? If they wanted me whole, why the box? For a long moment Edric did not answer, and when he did his painted voice was very gentle, the gentleness of a thing that has decided a child has earned the truth even when the truth is the worst one. Because what he wants from you, Harry, he cannot take all at once, said Edric. He wants the crown poured out of you slow, drop by drop, into a stone, as he has drunk the castle slow for 200 years. And a thing you pour out slow you must first put somewhere small and dark and quiet where it cannot run away while you work. That is what the box is for. Now you know the shape of the thing that hunts you, and the shape of it is patient, and the shape of it is a long way north, and the shape of it has just learned it cannot use its hands. He came as near the glass as paint allowed. Go back to your body, sleep if you can. And in the morning, before the eggs, press that ring to your aunt's silver teaspoon and say the goblin's name, because the next thing through your door will not be something the castle can throw, and you are going to want the bank at your back before it arrives. Far to the north in the cold tower of Vane Hall, a stone the color of stolen gold rang once, sharply, the note of a thing whose servants have failed it, and Cassius Vane, who had felt his men thrown the length of a Surrey street through the thread that bound the stone to the child, sat very still in the dark and revised his arithmetic, and did not lose his temper, because patient men do not lose their tempers, they lose their patience, which is a far more dangerous thing. The records office did not tell us he was awake, said Cassius Vane softly to the singing stone, or what he is when he wakes. Very well, we will not send hands again. He rose, tall and gray in the dark. We will send law. A crowned child is still a child, and a child has a guardian, and a guardian can be changed, and a thing the records office can do as easily as it can tell me which window is tell me exactly whose name is on the petition that says where the child sleeps. His cold mouth moved. Let the old man think he has time. Let the bank file its bonds. I have waited 7 generations, and I have learned the one thing none of them know, that you do not need to steal a child the world is watching. You need only become the man the law says the child belongs to, and then you may take him through the front door in daylight with the ministry's own seal on the papers, and no castle in Britain can call it theft. The stone sang on, north out of the castle, and in a cupboard in Surrey, a 6-year-old held his bruised wrist and watched the gray gold crown bank slowly back to an ember under his skin, and waited for the morning and the eggs and the next of them to knock. Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. The hidden vaults. In the gray of the next morning, Harry pressed the heir's ring to the back of Aunt Petunia's second-best teaspoon, the one she kept for the vicar, and said the goblin's name into the empty kitchen, and waited to find out whether any of the impossible night before had been real. The spoon went cold in his hand. That was all at first. Then the cold spread up his fingers, and the polished silver of the bowl darkened, and a voice came out of it, small and flat and entirely unsurprised, the voice of Scarnock speaking from a bank under London through a teaspoon in Surrey. You are awake early, Heir, said the spoon, and you are using the seal, which means something has happened that frightened you enough to use it. Tell me, be quick and be exact. A frightened account that rambles is a frightened account that gets robbed. So Harry told him, quick and exact, the window and the rope and the tin box and the wall that held and the men thrown into the road, and there was a silence from the spoon when he had finished, the cold, flat goblin silence Harry was beginning to know, the silence of a creature doing arithmetic. Vain, said the spoon at last. It was not a question. The silvered rope is a vain make, the tin box is a vain patience. No one else in Britain still works that slow. A pause. You were not harmed past a bruise. Good, the castle did its part, which means they will not try the wall again, which means the next thing will not be a thing the castle can throw. Heir, listen to me. There is a letter coming to your house soon, by ordinary muggle post, because they are clever enough to come the boring way. It will be a solicitor's letter, and it will be very polite, and it will say that a person of standing has filed a petition of guardianship over you, on grounds of the unfitness of your present keepers, and it will be entirely, perfectly, murderously legal. The spoon went colder. When it comes, you will not panic, and you will not run, and you will not let your aunt burn it. You will keep it, and you will press the seal to silver, and you will read it to me word for word, because a petition is a battlefield, and the bank has fought on that field 700 years and has never once lost. Do you understand? You're going to fight a piece of paper, Harry said. I'm going to fight a piece of paper, Scarnock agreed, with a better piece of paper, which is the only weapon that has ever truly mattered in the world above the line, and the one wizards always forget the goblins are better at. Now go and do your eggs, Heir, and look meek and frightened for your relatives, because a frightened, unremarkable child is the safest thing to be this morning, and you are very good at being it. The spoon warmed and brightened and was only a teaspoon again, and Harry stood alone in the bright yellow kitchen with the sound of Dudley beginning to thunder down the stairs, and understood that the war had moved, in a single night, from the cupboard window to the post. The letter came 2 days later. It came exactly as Scarnock had said it would, in a cream envelope of heavy paper, addressed to Mr. and Mrs. V. Dursley in a copperplate hand, delivered by an ordinary postman on an ordinary bicycle, and Uncle Vernon opened it at the breakfast table with the bored irritation of a person expecting a bill and read 4 lines of it and went the color of old porridge. "Petunia," he said in a strangled voice. "Petunia, it's about the boy. There's a solicitor, wants to take him. Says there's grounds." Aunt Petunia took the letter and read it, and her face did a complicated thing, and Harry, watching from the doorway with a plate of toast going cold in his hands, saw the exact moment she understood that the strange, unwanted boy she had spent 6 years not mentioning had become, overnight, a thing that important and powerful people wanted, and that the wanting had arrived at her own breakfast table wearing the costume of the law. She was not a clever woman about most things, Aunt Petunia, but she was clever about danger to her household, and the letter was danger, and Harry watched her decide in real time that the danger was his fault, which was the conclusion she reached about all dangers. "This is your doing," she said to him, low and shaking. "Whatever freakishness you've brought into this house, Vernon, burn it." "You can't burn it," Harry said. Came out before he had decided to say it, plain and certain, and both the Dursleys turned to stare at him, because Harry did not say things at the breakfast table. Harry was a quiet that did the eggs, and the quiet had spoken. "It's a legal document," Harry went on, because there was no taking it back now, and the truth was the only tool he had. "If you burn it, it doesn't go away, it just means you didn't answer it, and not answering is worse, because then they win without even having to argue. You have to keep it, you have to keep all of it, because there's going to be more." He set the cold toast down. "Somebody wants to take me away from here. You don't want me here, so you might think that's good. But the person who wants to take me isn't doing it to be kind, and if they take me the wrong way, through the wrong door, then everyone asks how a boy got carried out of this house, and they ask you." He let it land exactly the way Scarnock would have. "Keep the letter, give it to me. I know someone who's good at letters." There was a silence at the breakfast table of number 4 Privet Drive of a wholly new kind, the silence of 2 adults discovering that the quiet, unregarded thing in the corner of their household had been, all along, paying a great deal more attention than they were comfortable with. Uncle Vernon's mouth worked. Aunt Petunia's hand went to her throat. And then Aunt Petunia, who was clever about danger, looked at the cream envelope and looked at Harry, and did the calculation, and pushed the letter an inch across the table toward him, and said nothing at all, which was the closest thing to surrender the house had ever offered him. She watched him the rest of that morning, though with the same sidelong worry she gave the weather before hanging out the washing, and once when he came in from the garden, she had a thing in her face that Harry had never seen there before and could not at first read, until he understood it was the look of a person standing too close to a fire she had spent her whole life pretending was not lit. She did not speak of it. Aunt Petunia spoke of nothing, that was her whole method. But that evening there was an extra sausage on Harry's plate that no one mentioned, and Harry, who counted everything, counted it, and understood that fear could make a person kinder than love ever had, and that this was a sad thing to learn at 6 and a useful one, and he kept it. Harry took the letter down the line that night and read it to Scarnock through the cold of the first hall, word for murderous word, and the goblin listened, and at the end of it he was quiet for a long time. "It is well made," Scarnock said at last, with the flat professional respect of one craftsman for another. "Cassius Vane has not put his own name to it, of course. He has put the name of a respectable, childless couple of good blood and better references, who will raise you in comfort and safety and hand you to him the moment the ink is dry, and the couple do not even know whose errand they run, which is the elegance of it. The petition cites the cupboard Heir. It cites the cupboard and the missed birthdays and the bruises a school nurse once wrote down and a ministry clerk once filed and forgot, and every one of those things is true, which is what makes it deadly. The most dangerous lie is the one built entirely out of true bricks." The goblin's voice was iron. "But they have made one error, and the error is the same error all their cleverness makes, which is that they do not know about us. They think you are a friendless, wizarding child with no guardian able to fight a petition. They do not know that you became, 9 days ago, the kept trust of the oldest bank in Britain. So tomorrow the bank will file. We will assert the heir's protection. We will demand the matter be heard before a magical court, because your inheritance makes you a ward of magical law and no muggle bench may touch you, and we will demand to be named an interested party, which we are by treaty, by right, and by 700 years of precedent the Wisengamot does not dare overturn." "Will we win?" Harry asked. "We will not lose," said Scarnock, which Harry was beginning to understand was a different and more honest thing, but understand the shape of it. "A custody fight in a magical court is slow. There will be a hearing some weeks from now before the Wisengamot's family bench. Until the hearing, the law freezes everything exactly as it stands, which means you remain in the cupboard, which is the one place the petition has already proven the world can reach you. We have bought you time, we have not bought you safety. And Vane has bought the same weeks we have, and he will not spend them sitting in his tower being patient, because his patience is finally, after 7 generations, running out. A pause, and then the spoon-cold voice did a thing it had not done before, which was hesitate. There is one more thing in this letter you should know, Heir, because you will hear it at the hearing, and it is better you hear it now from me, who will tell you plainly. Yours is not the only petition that has been filed for you this week. Harry went very still in the cold of the hall. 2 days after Vane's solicitor lodged his, said Scarnock, a second petition was entered by a different hand through the ministry's own door with the chief warlock's seal upon it and no name beneath that seal but the name of the school. It asks the same thing the first one asks. It asks that you be removed from the unfit keeping of your relatives and placed, for your safety, in the care of a magical guardian of standing. It is signed Albus Dumbledore. The spoon let that sit. He is not lying about your safety, Heir. That is the trouble with him. The cupboard is unfit, and the men who came through your window are real, and he genuinely means to keep you from them. He will tell the court so, and the court will believe him because it is true. And then he will take you to a fortress in the north that no Vane could ever breach, and he will be kind to you, and he will teach you, and he will own you gently for the rest of your childhood, and shape you into whatever the world he is building requires you to be. 2 thieves are at your door, Harry. One wants to drink you and one wants to wield you, and the one who wants to wield you means it kindly, and that is precisely why he is the harder to refuse. The cold voice went, for an instant, almost gentle. The bank wants neither. The bank wants only to keep its trust, which is to keep you whole and free in yours. We will fight both petitions, but you should know there are 2, because a child who walks into a hearing thinking there is one enemy and finds there are 2 has already half lost, and you, Heir, do not lose. Harry was quiet for a moment in the great cold hall, turning it over, the 2 petitions, the drinker and the wielder, the kindness that was a current and the patience that was a tap. The drinker he understood. The drinker wanted a thing he had and would take it, and that was a clean kind of enemy, the kind the cupboard had taught him to read in his sleep. The wielder was worse and harder, and Harry sat with it a long moment before he could put words around why. It was because the wielder did not want to take anything from Harry at all. The wielder wanted to give him things, safety and teaching and a warm bed and a place at a table with his name on it, and to ask in return only that Harry let himself be aimed. And the terrible part, the part Harry turned over and over and could not make come out any other way, was that part of him wanted to say yes, because a warm bed and a place at a table were the 2 things he had wanted his whole life, and the one offering them was offering them out of something that was almost nearly very close to love. The drinker I can fight, Harry said at last, slowly. He's going to do something I can see. But the other one, Dumbledore, I can't fight him by beating him, can I? He's not trying to beat me. He's trying to be nice to me until I give up. You don't win that by being cleverer. You win it by not wanting the thing he's holding out. And I do want it, Scarnock. That's the part that scares me. He's the only one who's bringing me anything I actually want. He looked up. So I have to be the kind of person who can say no to the thing he wants most. Edric said that's the lesson. I just didn't know it would be that one. No, said the spoon very quietly. It is always that one in the end. Every other lesson is practice for that one. How long? Harry said. Until the hearing. 5 weeks. And in 5 weeks, Harry said slowly, the thing Vane's been waiting 200 years for gets riper. You said his patience is running out, so he's not really going to wait for a court, is he? The court's just to keep everyone looking the wrong way. The petition is the front door. He's already shown me he's got a back one. He looked up at the dark of the woven roof. I have to see the wound, Scarnock. Edric wanted to take me before the hearing, before it ripens. I think I'm running out of weeks faster than you think. There was a silence from the spoon, the long, flat goblin silence, and when Scarnock spoke again there was something in it that was almost respect and almost grief. The account said a child, he said. The account did not say a general. Go and see your wound, Heir. And be quick, we will hold the field of paper. You hold the field beneath the stone, and press the seal the moment anything changes, because in this war the side that knows first is the side that lives. So Harry went to see his wound, and Edric took him down. They went deeper than the first hall, deeper than Harry had ever gone, down through doorways that opened only for the crown. Downstairs the castle grew under his feet as he needed them, and the deeper they went the older the stone became, until the dressed and fitted blocks of the upper castle gave way to something rougher and vaster, the living rock the 4 had built upon, the bones of the hill itself. The gray-gold light of the weave grew thin and far apart down here, a few bright threads strung across an enormous dark, and the bell note that rang through every floor above dropped to a deep, slow pulse, the heartbeat of the foundation, felt rather than heard. It was the oldest place Harry had ever stood in, and it knew it. The walls here were not built but found, the first builders having dug down to the living root of the mountain and laid their binding into rock that had been old when the island was young, and the deep magic ran through that rock like marrow through a bone, faint and patient and enormous. Harry walked through it with the crown lighting a circle no wider than a kitchen table, and beyond the circle the dark went down, and the dark was not empty. He could feel the four in it, not as people, not even as the cord, but as a kind of pressure, a fourfold attention woven into the stone so long ago that it had stopped being separate from the stone, the way a hand that has held a tool for 50 years stops being separate from the tool. They had bled here, the rock remembered it, and the rock was glad in its slow stone way that someone had finally come down to where the blood was. "Mind your feet," said Edric. His portrait had not come down with him, of course. Portraits did not travel. But his voice came carried in the weave, dry and close as ever, the one human thing in all that ancient dark. "Few have ever stood this deep. The keepers cannot come here at all. This is the root of the binding air, the place where the four laid the first stone and bled on it and bound their wills into the rock, and everything you have seen above grows out of this. If the castle is a tree, you're standing in its roots." "And somewhere in these roots, I can feel it," Harry said. "It's louder down here, the pulling." It was. The black thread, the single wrong line woven through the golden weave, had been a hair's breadth thing in the first hall, a splinter you would only notice if you measured. Down here, close to the root, it was a cable. It ran through the deep dark like a vein of cold nothing, thick as Harry's arm, and where it crossed the bright threads of the foundation it did not merely dim them, it had eaten them, frayed them to gray, and around it the living rock itself had gone soft and pale and sick, a slow rot spreading out from the line of it into the bones of the hill. The deep, slow heartbeat of the foundation, when Harry listened, had a catch in it, a stumble every few beats, the falter of a heart with something wrong in a chamber. He followed the cable down. Edric's voice came with him, quieter now, and the dark pressed close, and the few bright threads grew fewer, until Harry came at last to the place the wound was anchored, and stopped and looked, and the thing at the bottom of him that he had named once went very cold and very still. It was a sliver of stone, that was all. A wedge of gray gold rock no longer than Harry's hand, driven into the very heart of the foundation, into the first stone, the founding stone, the place where 4 people 1,000 years dead had bled and bound their wills, and from the buried sliver the cable of cold nothing ran up and out and away, north, drinking. Around the sliver the founding stone had cracked, a slow spreading web of cracks, gray and sick, and into each crack the cold nothing had crept, patient, 200 years patient, widening, drinking, killing the castle one heartbeat at a time from the deepest root up. "There," Edric breathed. 200 years I have known it was there and never seen it, because no eye that could reach this deep was ever fit to look, and now I am looking through yours, and I wish to every founder I were not. That is vein stone, Heir. The same rock as the stone in his tower. His ancestor drove it into the founding stone disguised as a mason, and it has been drinking ever since, up the thread into the stone, drop by drop, and the veins have grown strange and long lived on the tithe of it, and waited. His voice dropped. "Look at the cracks. Look how far they have spread. 200 years it took to spread that far, and now look at the color of the sliver. It is brighter than the stone around it, brighter than when I last dared look. Heir. It is full. After 200 years of slow drinking, it is nearly full, and a thing that is nearly full does not want another 200 years. It wants to be emptied all at once into something larger." They were all waiting, Harry. The thread waited, the stone waited, the veins waited. They were waiting for the same thing. "The crown," Harry said. The cold understanding came up through him whole. They were waiting for the crown to wake. Because while it was asleep the castle answered to nobody, so nobody could make it poor. But now it answers to me. So if they have me, he made himself finish it in order, the toaster voice, because saying the frightening thing in order was the only way to make it bearable. "If they have me and I'm the crown, they don't have to drink the castle slow anymore. They can make me pour it, all of it, through the thread into the stone all at once. That's what the box is for. That's why they want me whole. I'm not the thing they're stealing, I'm the tap they need to open." There was a silence in the deep root of the castle, and the slow heartbeat pulsed and caught and pulsed. "Yes," said Edric very quietly. "That is exactly it, and you are 6, and you reason it standing in the dark over the wound itself, and I have never in 1,000 years been so proud and so sorry of one thing at once." He let the heartbeat pulse twice. "Now you know the whole shape of it. The crown that saved you from the window is the same crown that makes you worth stealing. Asleep you were safe and the castle was dying. Awake the castle has a chance and you are a target. There was never a version of this where you got to be only safe. There was only ever the choice you already made with your wet knees in the first hall to come to keep." The dry voice gentled. "And keeping has a price, Heir, and the price is that you must do the hardest thing, the thing the 4 left for the one who would come. And I can show you that now because you have seen the wound with your own eyes and earned the right to see the cure." The deep dark shifted. Edric's voice led him, the crown lit the way, and Harry turned from the buried sliver and the slow web of cracks and saw, set into the living rock of the deepest root, a door he had not seen before because it had not been there to see, because it had been waiting, like everything in this place, for an Heir with the eyes to find it. It was small. That was the first surprise. After the soaring doorways of the first hall, after the windows onto Blade Keep and library and cistern and hearth, this door was low and plain, no taller than Harry himself, cut from a single slab of gray gold stone, and on it was carved no lion, no eagle, no badger, no serpent. On it were carved all four, woven together, the way they were woven in the crown on the back of his hand, and around them ran a band of the not-quite letters Harry could not read, and at the center, where the four met, there was a keyhole, and the keyhole was the exact shape of the seal on the ring in his pocket. "The heart vault," said Edric, and there was awe in his dry old voice, the awe of a servant before a door he was never permitted to enter. "I have known of it the way one knows of a rumor. No keeper has opened it, no heir has come to try. The four made it last of all, after the binding, after the wound was already coming, and they knew they could not stop it in their own time. They put something in their heir, a thing left for the one who would come to keep, to use against the one who would come to take. And it is locked, and the lock is the shape of your seal, and your seal is in your pocket, and I think," the dry voice was not quite steady, "I think it has been waiting for you longer than anything else in this whole castle, including me." Harry took the ring out of his pocket. It was warm in his hand, gray gold, the four-quartered shield on its face, and he stood before the low plain door in the deepest root of the oldest house in the magical world, and understood that whatever lay behind it was the four's answer to the thief, that they had trusted it to a person they would never meet, and that the person was him, 6 years old, with a bruise on his wrist and a cupboard for a home. He lifted the ring toward the keyhole. His hand stopped an inch away on its own. Because the crown on his other hand had begun, suddenly, to burn, not with welcome but with warning, a hot, urgent pulse, and the slow heartbeat of the foundation had quickened, and from very far above, up through 1,000 feet of stone and 1,000 years of weave, the castle sent its heir a single message, the way it had sent the white light up to warn the cupboard. The message was alarm. It had a direction, and the direction was Surrey and the surface, and his own sleeping body, 4 feet by 3. "Edric," Harry said, the ring still raised, the door still locked. "Something's at the house, something's wrong up top, I can feel it." "Then go," Edric said at once, no hesitation, the old soldier in him. "The vault has waited 1,000 years, it will wait an hour more, your body will not. Go, heir, go now and mind yourself and come back the moment you can." But Harry was already going, dragged up the line by the alarm in the crown, up out of the deep root and the locked door and the buried wound, up through the foundation and the halls and the woven roof, up the great humming thread into the cold and the clay and the flat gray weight of Surrey, into his own body in the cupboard under the stairs. He came awake to the sound of the doorbell. It was past 9, the house had gone to its evening quiet, the television muttering in the lounge, and the doorbell of number 4 rang through it like a stone dropped in a pond. Harry lay rigid on the thin mattress and listened, and through the crown, through the door at the bottom of him that would never close, he felt the thing on the doorstep, and it was not the vast warm ocean of Dumbledore, and it was not the cold, flat, clever pressure of the goblin. It was something else, something narrow and patient and cold as well water, a thing that smelled down the line faintly of the wound, of the cable of cold nothing in the deep root, and Harry understood before he heard the voice that the back door had opened while everyone was watching the front. Uncle Vernon answered it, grumbling. There was a murmur, smooth and courteous, and then Uncle Vernon's voice changed, gone uncertain in the way it never went. "It's Petunia, it's another one of these solicitor fellows, says it's about." "Good evening," said the cold, smooth voice in the hall, courteous as a closing door, and Harry felt the cold of it come over the threshold of the house and lean very gently toward the cupboard under the stairs. "Forgive the hour. My name is Mr. Crail, and I act in the matter of the child. There is no cause for alarm. I have not come to take anything tonight. I have come only to look and to leave some papers and to be quite sure the child is comfortable. The court does so like to know the child is comfortable." A pause, and Harry felt the cold attention swing toward the hall, toward the small door under the stairs, and stop and settle the way a compass needle settles. "I wonder, might I see him, only for a moment, only to see that he is well?" And Harry, 6 years old, with a locked vault 1,000 feet below him and a bruise still yellow on his wrist, sat up in the dark of the cupboard and put the heir's ring on his finger where it could be seen, and pressed his marked hand flat against the warm brick of the wall, and reached down the line for the bank and up through the crown for the castle, both at once, because the thread had come into his very hall wearing a courteous voice and clean papers, and the castle could not throw a writ. But the castle could do one thing a writ could not, which was bear witness, and Harry had decided in the space of a single breath in the dark that if Mr. Crail wanted to look at the heir of Hogwarts, then the heir of Hogwarts would let himself be looked at and would look back, and would make very sure that the cold thing in the hall understood that the child in the cupboard was no longer a child anyone could carry out a back door in a tin box. The cupboard door opened. Mr. Crail was a tall, spare, gray person with a soft voice and softer hands and eyes the color of weak tea, and he crouched down in the bright hall light and looked into the dark of the cupboard at the thin child on the thin mattress, and he smiled, the practiced smile of a process server who has done this 100 times and always found it painless, and he opened his mouth to say something gentle. And then he saw the ring. The gray gold shield on Harry's finger caught the hall light, the lion and the eagle and the badger and the serpent, and on the back of Harry's hand where it pressed the wall, a second shield had risen up out of the skin, burning soft and steady, and the warm brick under the child's palm had begun, very faintly, to glow. and the temperature in the cupboard had dropped and risen at once so that Mr. Krail's weak-tea eyes widened and his soft voice forgot its gentle thing, and he said instead, in a whisper that had gone suddenly and entirely sincere, "Oh, you actually are," they said, "but I didn't, you actually are." "I'm comfortable," Harry said. He kept his voice small and plain and let only his eyes carry the rest. "You can tell the court, tell them I'm comfortable and I keep my own counsel and I have a bank and I have a castle and I'm not in the tin box and I'm not going to be." He pressed his hand harder to the warm wall, and the glow brightened, and somewhere far below 1,000-year heartbeat quickened in answer to its air. "Tell your master I saw the wound, Mr. Krail. Tell him I know what the box is for. And tell him the next time he wants to look at me, he can do it at the hearing in the daylight with the bank in the room, where everyone can see whose hand is on the tap." Mr. Krail, who had come 100 times to crouch by 100 frightened children and leave his painless papers, did not leave his papers. He rose slowly, his soft hands not quite steady, and he looked at the small thing in the cupboard with the ring on its finger and the light under its skin, and he backed out of the hall of number 4 Privet Drive, murmuring apologies to a baffled Uncle Vernon, and he did not come back because some hands are bought to serve patient cruelty and some hands only think they are, and Mr. Krail had just discovered in the doorway of a cupboard which kind he was. When the front door had closed behind him and the house had gone quiet again, Harry lay back in the dark with the crown banking slowly to an ember, and he did not feel as though he had won. He had frightened a frightened man into running, which was the smallest kind of victory there was, the kind that only moves the trouble somewhere you cannot see it. So he went down the line once more, just for a moment, just to tell Edric, because there was no one in the waking world he could tell, and that he had begun to understand was the loneliest fact of his whole strange life, that the only person he could speak the truth to was a dead man in a painting 1,000 feet under a castle he had never been allowed to visit. He ran, Harry told the first hall. "Krail, I showed him the ring and the crown and he ran, but I couldn't open the vault, Edric. The thing the 4 left, we got to the door and then the house screamed and I had to come back and it's still locked down there and I don't even know what's in it." "I know," said Edric, and the dryness was gentle now, "and it gnaws at you, the not knowing, because not knowing is the one cupboard you cannot pick. But hear me, Heir, you did not fail to open it. You chose your own body over your curiosity in the half-second it mattered, and that choice is the whole of why the stone trusts you. A man who would let his body die to learn a secret is exactly the sort of man the 4 built that door to keep out." He came near the glass. "I will tell you the one thing I am sure of, and it is not much, but it is true. Whatever the 4 left behind that door, it is not a weapon, because they were not the sort to leave a weapon. I knew the last of their line, the thin sad heirs of the failing branch, and I knew the shape of the magic those 4 left in the stone, and it is all of a kind, all of it, every fire and every ward, and the kind is this: it shelters, it does not strike. So when the door opens for you, and it will, do not look behind it for a sword, look for a thing that keeps. They will have left you a way to keep, not a way to kill, because keeping was the only thing they ever truly believed in, and a person leaves behind the thing they believed in the end, not the thing they feared." The painted eyes held him. "Now go and sleep, the hearing is set, Skarnock will have told you, 5 weeks, and every one of them shorter than the last." So Harry went back up the line to his cold cupboard, and lay in Helga's borrowed warmth, and did not sleep for a long time, turning the locked door over and over in the dark of his mind as he turned everything over, and finding for once no shape under it that he could read, only Edric's words, "Look for a thing that keeps," going round and round like a key he did not yet have a lock for. Far to the north in the cold tower of Vane Hall, the stone the color of stolen gold sang on, and Cassius Vane, who had felt his man's nerve break through the thread that bound them, sat very still in the dark and understood that the front door and the back door had both been answered, and that the child had a bank and a castle and a tongue, and that there would be no more looking and no more papers and no more patience. 5 weeks, said Cassius Vane softly to the singing stone. He thinks he has 5 weeks. His cold mouth moved. Let him keep his hearing. Let the goblins fill the court with paper and the old man fill it with kindness, and let them all look very hard at the front door on the appointed day. He rose, tall and gray, and the light of the stone lay along his face and made it older than its years. I have waited 7 generations, and I have learned the one thing none of them know, which is that a thing the whole world is watching is a thing no one is guarding. On the day they are all in the courtroom, looking at the empty chair where the heir should sit, that is the day there will be no bank at his cupboard, and no castle warned, and no 5 weeks left at all. The stone sang, north out of the deep root, into the tower, into the long cold patience finally breaking. Bring me the masons, said the last and worst of the veins, the real ones this time. If the boy will not come out of his castle, we will go down into mine, and we will pull the wound out of the founding stone ourselves, and let the whole thing pour. Chapter 5 and Chapter 6. The siege of claims. 5 weeks is a long time when you are 6, and Harry spent them as he spent everything, which was learning, and at the end of the 5 weeks he knew 3 things he had not known at the start, and the third of them was going to save his life. The first thing he learned was the castle. Every night down the line, Edric drilled him in the deep magic the way a sergeant drills a recruit, not the showy spark and flash that wands did, but the slow architecture of the binding, how to feel a door before he reached it, how to send the crown's authority running ahead of him through 1,000 feet of stone, how to listen to the heartbeat of the foundation and hear, in its catch and stumble, the exact health of a thing the size of a mountain. He learned to walk the deep places without a light, because the crown was a light, and to read the temper of a corridor by the way the threads of the weave laned. He learned that the castle had moods, that it sulked when neglected and warmed when attended, that it was, under all its stone and grandeur, less like a fortress than like a very old, very large animal that had been waiting 1,000 years for someone to scratch behind its ears. He grew quick at it. He grew so quick that Edric stopped saying for a child and started saying nothing at all, which from Edric was the highest praise there was. The second thing he learned was paper. Skarnock came most evenings now, through the teaspoon or in person in the corner the windows could not see, and he taught Harry the law of the thing, the shape of a petition, the moves and countermoves of a custody fight, the names of the lords who would sit the family bench, and which of them owed money to whom. He taught Harry that a courtroom is a machine for converting the truth into a result, and that the result depends less on the truth than on who controls the order in which the truth is heard. He taught him that the most dangerous person in any room is the one who is certain he is doing good, because that person will never stop and cannot be shamed and does not take bribes. Harry took to it as he took to everything with a structure under it. A courtroom, he decided, was only a cupboard with better lighting and more rules, and he had spent his whole life learning the rules of a cupboard he was not allowed to leave. The third thing he learned 3 nights before the hearing, and he learned it standing in the deep root over the founding stone, and it was this: the wound was almost ripe, the cracks had spread. In 5 weeks the slow gray web around the buried sliver had widened a finger's breadth, which did not sound like much until Edric told him, in a voice gone flat and old, that a finger's breadth in 5 weeks was what the wound had done in 20 years before the crown woke, that the waking had not slowed the drinking, it had quickened it, because a tap that knows it is about to be opened drinks faster, and that the sliver now glowed so bright against the 6 stone around it that Harry could read by it. Not waiting for the hearing, Harry said. He said it as he said all the worst things in order, flat, the toaster voice. Everyone's getting ready for the hearing. You, me, Skarnock, Dumbledore, Malfoy, all of us were all pointed at the front door on the day. And Vane told his stone the same thing I'd tell mine. That's the day nobody's guarding anything except the door. He looked up from the glowing sliver. The hearing isn't the fight, Edric. The hearing's the thing that makes everyone look away from the fight. I know, said Edric quietly. I have known since his man broke and ran from your cupboard. He will move on the day of the hearing, because the day of the hearing is the one day in 5 weeks the whole world has agreed to stand in a courtroom and watch a chair. And I do not know what his move will be, Heir, and that is the part that has kept me awake, if a painting can be said to sleep. The dry voice was grim. So we will do the only thing left. We will go to the hearing, because if we do not, we lose you to the law, and that is its own ending. But we will go knowing it is a trap, which is the one advantage a trap cannot take from you. You will sit in that courtroom, Harry, and you will keep one hand on the line the whole time, one finger on the heartbeat of this castle, and the moment it changes, the moment the stone so much as flinches, you will know the real fight has started, and you will be the only soul in that room who does. So on the morning of the hearing, Harry put on the one set of clothes that fit, which Skarnock had sent, plain and grey and well-made, and he put the heir's ring on his finger where it could be seen, and he let a goblin of Gringotts take his hand and turn on the spot, and the world folded itself around him with a wrench and unfolded into marble. The Wisengamot's family bench sat in a high cold chamber of black stone deep beneath the ministry, lit by braziers of blue flame, and it was nothing like a muggle court, and everything like a cupboard with better lighting and more rules. Tiers of benches rose on 3 sides, full of robed figures Harry did not know, and at the front, behind a long table of dark wood, sat the 3 who would decide. A witch with a face like a closed account, and 2 wizards on either side of her, one fat and bored, one thin and watchful. At a table to the left sat the respectable, childless couple Vane had bought, looking nervous and well-dressed and entirely unaware that they were a weapon, and beside them a sleek solicitor who was not Mr. Crail, because Mr. Crail had not come back. At a table to the right, alone but for a single ancient goblin in robes of slate, sat Harry. In the gallery, in the best seat, in robes of deep blue with a traveling cloak the color of a kingfisher folded over the arm, sat Albus Dumbledore, who had filed the 3rd petition and who smiled down at Harry with a warmth that reached, the instant their eyes met, all the way into Harry like sunlight into water, and Harry felt the great patient ocean of him fill the cold chamber, and kept one finger on the line on the far-off heartbeat of the castle, and smiled the blank smile of a frightened child. Gave the old wizard nothing. 2 seats down from Dumbledore, pale and elegant and bored, sat Lucius Malfoy, who had come to watch and to learn, whose hand held the chair, and whose pale eyes moved over Harry once, dismissive and then again sharper when they found the ring. The witch with the closed account face rapped a black gavel. "We are convened," she said in a voice with no given it anywhere, "in the matter of the guardianship of the minor child Harry James Potter. 3 petitions stand before this bench. The bench will hear them in the order filed. Mr. Yaxley, for the first petitioners, you may open." The sleek solicitor rose and opened, and he was good. Harry had to give him that. He did not rave, he built. He laid out the cupboard, and the missed birthdays and the bruises and the school nurses filed in forgotten notes, brick by true brick, and with each brick the chamber grew colder toward the absent Dursleys and warmer toward the respectable couple who would give the poor neglected child a proper home. And it was all true, every brick, and Scarnock had been right that the truth of it was what made it deadly. By the end the bored-fat judge was nodding, and even the thin watchful one had set down his quill, and the respectable couple were doing their best to look like people who could love a child they had never met, and the trap was beautifully, lawfully sprung. "Thank you, Mr. Yaxley," said the witch. "The bench notes the petition is thorough." She turned her closed account face toward the right-hand table. "The second filing is entered by Gringotts Bank, asserting an interest in the child. The bench will say plainly that it does not recall the last occasion a goblin sat at this table to contest a guardianship, and the bench is not certain it approves. You will need to be brief, and you will need to be relevant. Speak." Scarnock rose. He was small and gray, and he did not raise his voice, and the cold high chamber went very quiet to hear him, because there is a kind of quiet a creature can carry into a room that is more commanding than any shout. "Gringotts asserts no interest in the child's home," said Scarnock. "Gringotts does not care which kitchen the child eats in. Gringotts asserts an interest in the child's protection because the child is, by the oldest law of the bank, a kept trust, and the bank does not abandon a trust, and the bank will not stand in this chamber and watch a trust be handed across a table to a respectable childless couple of whom the bank knows 3 things the bench does not." He let it sit. "First, that they were selected, vetted, and funded not by themselves, but by an agent acting for a party who has not put his name to this petition. Second, that the same party sent men over the child's garden fence 9 weeks ago with silvered rope and a tin box to take the child by force in the night, an attempt that failed, and which the bank can document, and which I will lay before this bench under seal if it is wished. And third, the old goblin turned slowly and looked up at the gallery, at the elegant pale lord 2 seats from Dumbledore, that the party in question has spent a very great deal of gold very recently on a very great quantity of masons. The bench may draw its own conclusions about a man who petitions for a child with one hand and hires diggers with the other." The chamber stirred. Lucius Malfoy's bored face did not change, but his pale hand tightened on his cane, and Harry, watching, understood that Scarnock had just told the whole room that this was a theft wearing a petition, without naming a name he could not yet prove, and that the not naming was sharper than any accusation, because now every lord in the gallery was looking sideways at every other lord and wondering which of them had bought the masons. "That is a great many insinuations," said the witch coldly, "and not one fact this bench can rule on. Have you a fact, goblin, or only suspicions dressed for court?" "I have a fact," said Scarnock. "The child cannot be given to anyone today by anyone lawfully, because the child is not an ordinary minor. The child holds, by recognition of the deep magic and the unbroken record of my bank, an inheritance that makes him a ward of magical law in the 1st degree, and a ward of the 1st degree cannot be assigned a guardian by this bench or any bench without the consent of the institution to which his inheritance is bound. That institution is Hogwarts School. And Hogwarts School cannot consent today, because Hogwarts School has no living voice but the one sitting at this table in the body of a 6-year-old, which is precisely the matter you are convened to decide, which means," the cold, flat goblin voice landed the trap shut, "that this bench is being asked to grant away the only person with the legal standing to approve the grant. You cannot give the child to a guardian, madam, until the child has a guardian, and the child cannot have a guardian until the child approves one, and the child is 6. The law has tied its own knot. I did not tie it. The founders did, 1,000 years ago, and your bench is not old enough to cut it." There was a silence in the cold high chamber of a quality Harry had not heard before, the silence of a great many clever people discovering all at once that a small gray creature had walked into their court and demonstrated that their entire proceeding was, in law, impossible. And it was into that silence that Albus Dumbledore rose from the gallery, unhurried, vast and warm and grave, and said gently, "If the bench will permit an old schoolmaster a word, I believe I can untie the goblin's knot. And I believe when I have that every person in this room will agree the answer was before us all along." The bench permitted it, because the bench was not in the habit of refusing the chief warlock, and because every face in the chamber turned toward the old wizard the way a field of flowers turns toward the sun, and Harry, watching from the small table at the right, felt the whole gravity of the room tilt, and understood that the most dangerous moment of the morning had arrived wearing slippers. "My honored friend from the bank is entirely correct," Dumbledore said, and the warmth of him filled the cold stone like firelight. The child cannot be given to a stranger, for the child is a ward of the school, and the school must speak for the child before any guardian is named, and the school's only living voice is a boy of 6, which is a knot indeed. But observe, the knot unties itself the moment one asks the obvious question: who in all of Britain already speaks for Hogwarts? Who holds its keys, keeps its halls, answers for its children to this very Wisengamot year upon year, and has done so for 50 years without blemish? He spread his long hands, and the gesture was humble, and the humility was the most practiced thing in the room. I do not ask this bench to give the child to me. I would never be so presumptuous. I ask only that the bench recognize what is already true, that the headmaster of Hogwarts is, in law and in love, the natural guardian of the heir of Hogwarts until that heir is grown enough to choose his own course. Let the child stay warded under my care at the school among children, safe from rope and tin box and patient gold alike, and let no permanent thing be decided until he is of an age to decide it. That is not a seizure. That is a grandfather opening his door to a grandchild who has nowhere else that is safe. It was, Harry thought, listening with one finger on the line, the most beautiful move he had ever watched anyone make, and the most dangerous, because every word of it was true and every word of it was a cage. The bored-fat judge was nodding again. The thin, watchful one had picked his quill back up and was writing. Even Scarnock had gone still and grey and calculating, because Dumbledore had not fought the knot. He had agreed with it, and then stepped through the one gap it left, and the gap led to a tower in the north with 1,000 soft locks on the door. In the gallery, Lucius Malfoy's pale eyes had stopped being bored entirely. They were fixed on Dumbledore now with the bright fury of a man watching a rival reach a prize first, and Harry filed that away too, that there was a lord in this room who would hate any cage Dumbledore built simply because Dumbledore had built it, and that a hatred like that was a tool, if it ever came to needing one. The whole chamber was leaning toward the old man's kindness, warming to it, settling toward it as toward a comfortable chair, and the offer hung in the blue-flamed air, reasonable and gentle and almost won. Harry kept one finger on the line. He kept it there while Dumbledore spoke, while the great warm voice filled the chamber and untied Scarnock's knot the way only Dumbledore could, not by force but by kindness, by proposing himself, the headmaster of Hogwarts, the one man in Britain who already held the castle's outer keys, as the natural and temporary guardian of its heir, until the heir was old enough to choose. It was elegant, it was reasonable. It was, Harry understood, listening, the most dangerous move on the board, because it was the move that wore the face of the obvious good, and the whole chamber was leaning toward it, warming to it, the board judge nodding again, the watchful one picking his quill back up, even Scarnock's grey face gone still and calculating, because Dumbledore's offer was the one offer the law could actually accept. Harry kept one finger on the line. And 3 sentences into Dumbledore's gentle, reasonable, world-shaping speech, the line screamed. It was not a sound. It came up through the marble floor, through the chair, through the soles of Harry's borrowed shoes, the same way the cord had come up through him the first night in the first hall, except this was not a voice, it was a wound. It was the heartbeat of the founding stone going from a slow, sick stumble to a ragged, tearing lurch, and Harry felt, 1,000 miles away and closer than his own ribs, the founding stone begin to come apart. He went rigid in his chair. No one noticed, because everyone was watching Dumbledore. Harry sat in the cold, high chamber with his finger on the line, and felt the masons reach the stone in the tower of Vane Hall, felt them begin the thing they had been bought for, felt the thread of cold nothing go suddenly taut as a hauling rope and begin to pull, and the buried sliver in the heart of the founding stone shifted in its socket of cracked rock, and the whole deep root of the castle groaned, and the grey gold light of the weave, 10,000 threads strung across 1,000 years, dimmed by a degree. And then by another, as the drinking that had taken 200 years became, in the space of 3 of Dumbledore's reasonable sentences, a flood. This was the move, not the petition. The petition was the chair everyone agreed to watch. This was the move happening now while the whole world sat in a courtroom being kind to each other, and Harry was the only soul in the room who could feel it, exactly as Edric had said he would be. He had perhaps a minute before the dimming showed, before the instruments in Dumbledore's distant office began to shriek, and the old wizard's gentle speech died in his throat, a minute in which he was the only one who knew. And in that minute Harry Potter, 6 years old, sitting in a borrowed grey suit at a table in the deepest court in Britain, did the arithmetic, the cold fast arithmetic at the bottom of him, and understood that he could not fight this with his body, that his body was needed here, sitting upright and unremarkable in a chair, that the fight was 1,000 miles north and 1,000 feet down, and that there was only one part of him that could reach it. He had to go down the line, now, from here. In the middle of a courtroom, and his body would slump in the chair, and they would think the child had fainted from the strain, and that would buy him minutes, and minutes were all the founding stone had left. He reached out under the table where the goblin could see, and he gripped Scarnock's grey hand hard once, and the old keeper of dormant accounts looked down at him sharply, and Harry mouthed 3 words, the only warning he had time for. They're taking it. And then he let go of the table and the room and his own upright body and reached for the line and wanted the deep root with everything he had and let go of the wanting. He fell out of the courtroom and into the dying heart of the castle. The deep root was in agony. Harry came down into a dark that pulsed red where it had pulsed gold, the founding stone heaving under the strain of the pulling thread, the web of cracks no longer gray but bleeding light, the deep magic of 1,000 years pouring out through the taut cold cable into the north faster than Harry could think. The heartbeat of the foundation was a ragged thing now, fast and shallow and wrong, the beat of a heart bleeding out, and the bright threads of the weave were going dark all around him, one after another, the lights of the castle guttering as the magic that fed them was hauled away. Somewhere far above, through the dimming weave, he could feel the upper castle beginning to feel it too, the candles in distant corridors guttering, the moving stairs slowing, the portraits stirring in their sleep, the whole vast animal of the place shuddering as the thing that had been bleeding it for 200 years finally opened its throat to drink. "Edric," Harry shouted into the dark, and his voice was swallowed, no echo, the same dead air as the first night, except now the air was dying. "Here." Edric's voice came thin and strained and close. "I am here, Heir, I am holding what I can, which is nothing, I am a painting, I have no hands." And Harry understood that the old castellan had been down here the whole time, in the dark over the wound, doing the only thing a painting could do, which was to witness and to grieve. He has the stone. He has set his masons to the stone, and they are pulling the thread, and the thread is anchored in the sliver, and the sliver is anchored in the heart of the founding stone, and he is hauling on it like a man hauling a splinter out of a wound with a winch, and when it comes free, Harry, when the sliver tears loose, it will not come alone. It is barbed. It will bring the heart of the founding stone with it, and the founding stone is the first stone, the stone the four bled on, and if it cracks through, the binding fails, the whole binding, every ward and every weave and every fire, 1,000 years of it, gone in a night, and the castle dies, and the magic in it pours north into a stone in a tower and makes Cassius Vane the most powerful thing in Britain over the corpse of the oldest house in the world. The dry voice broke. "I cannot stop it. The keepers cannot stop it. There is only you and the thing the four left, and the door, Harry, the door. It is the only card left on the table, the heart vault. The low plain door in the deepest root, carved with all four founders woven into one, the keyhole shaped like the seal on Harry's hand." Harry turned, and the door was there, lit red now by the bleeding stone, and he crossed to it through the heaving dark with the heartbeat of the castle failing under his feet, and he took the Heir's ring off his finger, and his hand did not stop this time because there was no warning left to heed. There was only the dying castle and the locked door and the thing the four had left for the one who would come. He put the seal to the keyhole and turned it. The heart vault opened. It did not open like a door. It opened like an eye, like a flower, like the dawn, the four-quartered carving splitting along the lines that bound the four founders together and folding back into the living rock. And out of the dark behind it came light, not the failing gray gold of the dying weave, but a light older than the weave, the light of the four themselves, the first light, the light they had bled into the first stone before they had built anything at all. And it poured out of the heart vault into the agonized dark of the deep root, and it was warm. And it was vast, and it stopped the bleeding where it touched, the way a hand pressed to a wound stops it, and the ragged heartbeat of the foundation steadied for a moment under the old first light. The dark drew back from it the way shadow draws back from a struck match, and for one breath Harry stood in a pool of the oldest light in Britain, 1,000 years old and older, the light of four people who had loved a thing enough to bury their own deaths inside it so that it might outlast them. And he understood, standing in it, that he had been wrong about what the founders had left him, that he had expected a weapon and been given instead a memory of warmth. And in the heart vault on a plinth of the first stone lay the thing the four had left. It was not a sword, it was not a crown, it was not a weapon at all, and Harry understood, looking at it, that he should have known it would not be, because the four had not been the sort to leave a weapon. It was a plain thing, and it was the last thing he expected, and it was, when he understood what it was, the most powerful thing in the room. It was a single stone. Gray gold the size of his two fists, the exact size and shape of the tithe stone in the tower of Vane Hall, the exact size and shape of the wedge of cold nothing buried in the founding stone, because it was the same rock, the founding stone's own heart, cut and kept in waiting, the true heart of Hogwarts, the thing the wound had been drinking toward for 200 years without ever being able to reach, because the four had taken it out and locked it away behind a door only a true heir could open. On the day they realized the thief was coming, and they could not stop him in their own time. And around the stone, cut into the plinth in letters that for the first time Harry could read, because the crown had grown in him enough to read them at last, were four lines, one in a hand that blazed, and one in a hand that flowed, and one in a hand that warmed, and one in a hand that hissed, and together they said, "We could not pull the thief's barb from our heart, for it was barbed to bring the heart with it. So we cut our heart out first and hid it here, and left the thief his barb in a stone of no worth, that when he hauls at last he hauls on nothing, and the heart of this house is safe in the hand of the one who came to keep. Heir, he will try to take everything. Let him have the husk, carry the heart out. A house is not its walls. A house is the fire someone keeps in it. Keep ours. Harry stood in the light of the heart vault with the heart of Hogwarts before him, and understood the whole shape of it at last. The thousand-year game the four had played against a thief they would never meet, and the move they had left for a child they would never know. That the wound in the founding stone was real, and the pulling was real, and Cassius Vane was about to haul with all his stolen strength on a barb sunk in a stone. But the stone he was hauling on was a decoy, a husk the four had left in place of their true heart, and the true heart was here in the vault in reach of Harry's hand, and the only thing standing between Cassius Vane and total victory was whether Harry could carry the true heart out of the castle before Vane realized he was hauling on nothing. He reached for it. His hand closed around the heart of Hogwarts, gray gold and warm and heavier than the world, and the crown on the back of his hand blazed up to meet it, and the deep root flooded with the old first light, and far to the north Cassius Vane, hauling on his thread with the whole stolen strength of 7 generations, felt the resistance go suddenly, sickeningly slack, felt the barb he had sunk into the heart of Hogwarts tear free at last after 200 years, and bring with it nothing, a husk. A dead stone of no worth, the magic gone out of it, the heart not there, and in the same instant, through the thread that still bound the husk to the stone, Cassius Vane felt where the heart had gone. He felt it close around a small hand 1,000 miles south. He felt the crown blaze. He felt the air. Harry in the deep root heard the scream of fury come down the dying thread from the north, and felt the whole weight of Cassius Vane's attention swing toward him like a turning gun, and Edric's voice was suddenly shouting in the dark, no dryness left in it at all, only an old soldier's terror for the child in his charge. He knows, Harry, he knows where the heart is, he knows it's in your hand. Get out, get back to your body, get back now. He cannot take the castle anymore, so he's going to take you. But it was already too late, because Harry's body was 1,000 miles south in a courtroom, slumped in a chair, undefended, with the crown stretched 1,000 feet down holding the heart of Hogwarts in the deep root. And the deep magic that had thrown Vane's men through a window 9 weeks ago was spent and scattered and pouring back from the husk, and could not, in this one moment, in this single worst moment, reach up to guard the slumped body in the borrowed gray suit. And in the cold high chamber of the Wisengamot, in the confusion of a child who had fainted and an old headmaster's speech gone silent and 100 lords on their feet, no one was watching the side door, through which 3 of Cassius Vane's people now came, fast and quiet and unhurried, dressed as ministry healers with a stretcher and calm faces and every right in the world to carry away a collapsed child for his own safety. Harry felt the hands close on his distant body. He felt himself lifted. He felt the courtroom recede and the line stretch and the cold north pull, and he understood, with the heart of Hogwarts in one hand and his own body being carried out a side door 1,000 miles away, that he had won the only battle that mattered, the battle for the heart of the castle, and lost, in the same breath, the only thing that could keep him alive to enjoy it, which was his own freedom. Edric, he said into the steadying dark, and his voice was very small and very calm, the calm at the bottom of the worst moment of all. He's got me, the real me, they're carrying me out, I can feel it. Then listen, said Edric, fast, fierce, close. Listen to me, Heir, because this is the last thing I can give you before he takes you out of my reach. You have the heart. He cannot make the castle poor because the castle's heart is in your hand, not in the stone. So he has lost the thing he wanted for 200 years, and a man who has lost the thing he wanted for 200 years is not a careful man anymore. He is a desperate one, and a desperate man makes the one mistake the careful man never does. He will bring you to the stone. He will bring you and the heart together to the stone, because he thinks if he has both, he can still force it, he can still make you poor. And he will be wrong, Harry. He will be wrong because you are the one who came to keep, and the heart answers to you, and at the stone at the very end, in the place he has prepared for his triumph, you will be standing in the one spot in all of Britain where the heart of Hogwarts is in the hand of its true heir, and the thief has nowhere left to run. The old voice was shaking. Be brave a little longer, be the cupboard, carry the fire, and when he brings you to the stone, you do the thing the four did, you let him have the husk. And you keep ours. In the tower of Vane Hall, Cassius Vane stood over the husk of his own triumph and shook. It had come up out of the south at the end of his mason's thread, the thing he had waited 7 generations for, the heart of Hogwarts torn free at last from the founding stone, and it was a dead rock. It lay on the iron stand where the tithe stone had hummed for 200 years, gray and cold and empty, no magic in it at all, a stone of no worth, exactly as 4 people 1,000 years dead had promised it would be in letters he had never been permitted to read. For one long moment the last and worst of the Vanes stood in the cold of his tower, and understood that his whole house, every patient generation of it, had spent 2 centuries hauling on a string the founders had tied to brick. Then through the thread that still ran from the husk down into the deep root, he felt where the true heart had gone, and the shaking stopped, and something colder than fury took its place, which was calculation, which was the thing the Vanes had instead of a soul. The heart was in the child had it in his very hand. In the child's body, Vane reached down the thread, feeling the way a spider feels a far corner of its web. The child's body was 1,000 miles south, slumped and undefended in a courtroom, while the heir's whole strength was spent 1,000 feet underground holding the heart against him. Undefended, reachable, carryable. The healers, Cassius Vane said to the empty tower, to the masons frozen over their dead stone, and his voice had gone very quiet, the quiet of a man who has lost everything and found in the wreckage the one card that can win it all back. Tell my people at the ministry it is time. A child has fainted in the Wisengamot. They will carry him out for his own safety, and no one will stop them, because stopping a healer who carries a fainting child is the one thing no court in Britain will do. He turned to look down the long dark of the thread south toward the small, distant warmth that was the heart of the oldest house in the world held in a 6-year-old's fist. Bring me the heir and the heart with him both together into this tower. The founders cut their heart out so I could not take it from the stone. Very well, I shall take it from the boy. A stone cannot be threatened. A stone cannot be made to choose. But a child, the cold mouth moved, a child can be shown a price, and a child who came to keep can always, always be made to poor, because the very thing that crowned him is the thing that will not let him watch the innocent suffer. They built me a lock I cannot pick, and then they handed me the key, and the key is his kindness, and kindness, my old dead friends, is the one wall I have spent 7 generations learning to walk through. And so they carried Harry north. He drifted in and out of the dark of the sleeping draught they had given his body, and each time he surfaced he was somewhere new. A corridor, a fireplace roaring green, a long road under a cold sky, a gate of black iron, and each time the heart of Hogwarts was still in his fist, warm and whole because no hand but his could hold it, and the men carrying him had learned that with burned fingers and stopped trying. He could not move his body, but he was not, he understood, only his body. At the bottom of him the door stood open that would never close, and through it he could feel the castle far away, steadier now. The bleeding stopped, the heart safe in his hand, and he could feel Edric somewhere in the deep root, holding on, and he could feel the heart itself, warm against his palm, the fire someone had kept 1,000 years. He was carried helpless through the cold north toward a tower built for his undoing, and he was 6, and he was not afraid in the way the men carrying him would have understood, because Edric had taught him the one thing that mattered, which was that the cupboard is the safest thing you own, and that a person who carries a fire inside the dark where no one thinks to look is never, ever as helpless as he seems. And the line stretched and the cold north pulled, and the heart of Hogwarts burned grey gold in Harry's hand, and the deep root and the heart vault and the old dead castellan all receded into a single point of light far behind him as Cassius Vane's people carried the slumped body of a 6-year-old child out a side door of the Wisengamot in north, to a tower on a hill where 3 ley lines crossed, to a stone that had sung for 200 years and was about to learn at the very last what it had truly been waiting for. Chapter 6 and Chapter 7, the heir's word. Harry woke in a tower. He came up out of the dark slowly, the way you surface from deep water, and the first thing he understood was that his body had been brought a long way while the rest of him was elsewhere, because his arms ached at the shoulders where they had been held, and there was a taste of the sleeping draught at the back of his throat, bitter and green. The second thing he understood was that the heart of Hogwarts was still in his hand. They had not been able to take it. He could feel that they had tried. There were small burns across the knuckles of the men who had carried him. He would learn later where the grey gold stone had refused every hand but the one it had chosen. The third thing he understood was where he was, and he understood it through the crown before he opened his eyes, because the room he lay in was screaming. He opened his eyes. The Tower of Vane Hall was a high round room of black stone, windowless, lit by no fire, and at its center, on a stand of black iron, sat the stone. It was the size of a man's 2 fists, grey gold, the twin of the heart in Harry's hand, and it was the ugliest thing Harry had ever seen, because where the heart of Hogwarts was warm and whole, the stone was bloated and wrong, swollen with 200 years of drinking, and out of it ran the thread, the cable of cold nothing, down through the floor and away south, and the thread was slack now, and dying because the wound it had been anchored to had torn free at last and brought up nothing, a husk in the stone. After 2 centuries of feeding had begun very slowly to starve, and standing over it, tall and grey and older than Harry had imagined, his long hands flat on the iron stand, was Cassius Vane. "You are awake," said Vane, without turning. His voice was the cold, smooth, well-water voice Harry had felt come over the threshold of number 4 in the shape of Mr. Crail, except there was no courtesy left in it now, only the flat exhaustion of a man whose patience has finally, after 7 generations, run entirely out. Good. I had begun to fear the draught was too strong, and that would not do. The thing I require you awake for. The thing I require you to choose. He turned then, and his face in the grey gold light was a ruin of long patience, lined and bloodless, the face of a man who had spent the unnatural span of 7 men's lives waiting for one night. "Do you know what you're holding, child? The heart of the castle," Harry said. He kept his voice flat. He was lying on cold black stone with his arms aching and a kidnapper standing over him and the most powerful object in Britain in his hand, and he had decided, somewhere in the dark of being carried north, that he would not let this man see anything at the bottom of him because the bottom of him was the only thing left that was his. Your barb pulled out the husk. The four cut the heart out 1,000 years ago and hid it where only I could reach. You hauled for 200 years on nothing. He let that land flat and exact. You lost, you just haven't worked it out yet. Something moved in the ruined gray face, and it was not anger which Harry had braced for. It was worse than anger. It was a terrible, patient amusement, the amusement of a chess player who has seen 3 moves further than the child across the board. I worked it out, said Cassius Vane, in the carriage somewhere over the Midlands while you slept. You are correct. The four were cleverer than my ancestor, and they cut their heart out and they hid it, and they left him a husk to haul on, and for 200 years my house has been drinking from a decoy. It was, I will admit, the single most elegant act of foresight I have encountered in a long life spent admiring elegant things. He spread his long hands. But observe the flaw in it, child, the flaw the four could not close, because it is the same flaw all their cleverness shares, the flaw I have built 7 generations upon. They hid the heart where only the true heir could reach it, and then 1,000 years later the true heir reached it, and here you are, and here the heart is. The four spent their whole foresight ensuring the heart would only ever come into the hand of the one who came to keep. His ruined mouth moved. And then they died and left no one to ensure that the one who came to keep could not himself be kept. They locked the heart behind a door only you could open. They did not lock you behind a door only you could leave. And so the heart of Hogwarts has, at last, after 1,000 years, come within my reach. It simply had to come the long way round. It had to come inside a child. Harry lay very still on the cold stone, and the crown burned on the back of his hand, and the heart burned in his palm, and he understood that Vane was not wrong, that the four's beautiful 1,000-year plan had one gap in it, and that the gap was him, 6 years old, lying in a tower with aching arms, and that he was the gap, and he was also now the only thing standing in it. You want me to pour it, Harry said, into your stone, the heart. You want me to put the heart of the castle into your stone, and then you'll have it, and the castle answers to whoever holds its heart. He was working it out aloud, the toaster voice, because saying the frightening thing in order was the only way to make it bearable, and because every second he spent saying it was a second the crown spent reaching quietly for the thread. You can't take it from me. It burns your men, so you have to make me give it. You have to make me choose to give it. He looked up at the ruined gray face. Why would I ever choose that? Because, said Cassius Vane, and he gestured once with a long hand toward the dark edge of the round room of them. The shadows at the edge of the tower moved, and Harry saw what he had not seen, half hidden in the dark beyond the stone's light, people, bound people. A dozen of them slumped against the black wall, gray-faced and still, and Harry knew them, some of them with a lurch, the respectable, childless couple from the courtroom, the sleek solicitor, 2 of the Wisengamot scribes, a healer, ordinary people, the small machinery of Vane's long, quiet plan, used up now and gathered here, and over each of them lay a thread of the cold nothing, thin and gray, the same nothing that had drunk the castle, except these threads ran the other way. Ran from the dying stone into the slump-bound people, and Harry understood, sickened, what the starving stone was doing to keep itself alive now that the castle was beyond its reach. The stone hungers, said Vane, and the castle is closed to it, and so it drinks what is nearest, which is them, which is the people who served my purpose and are no longer required. It is drinking them slowly. It will drink them dry by morning, a dozen lives for one night's strength, and it is, I confess, a waste and an ugliness and beneath the dignity of my house. I would prefer not to, I would so much prefer not to. He looked down at Harry with his terrible, patient eyes. Give the stone the heart, child, and it need not drink them. Give it the heart, and it will be full and gentle, and these dozen frightened people will wake in the morning and go home and remember none of it. Refuse, and they die through the night, one by one in the dark, while you hold in your hand the one thing that could have saved them and chose instead to keep a castle. The ruined mouth almost smiled. You came to keep, the four wrote. Let us discover what you came to keep. The walls of a school 1,000 miles away that you have never seen, or the dozen living people dying in this room. You are 6. Surely even a child can do that arithmetic. And there it was, the real trap, not the rope in the tin box. Not the petition, this. A choice built so that either answer fed the thief. A choice that took the very thing the four had crowned Harry for, the thing that had passed the first gate, the coming to keep, and turned it into the lever that would pry the heart out of his hand. Vane had not spent 200 years learning to steal castles. He had spent 200 years learning to steal the people who guarded them from the inside through the one door no ward could shut, which was the door of their own goodness. Harry lay on the cold stone and looked at the dozen dying people and the swollen stone and the ruined patient face, and the thing at the bottom of him that he had named once, weeks ago, in the dark of a cupboard, moved, and he let himself feel it, all of it, the fear, because Edric had said frightened was the answer that fit the question. And then he set it down gently in the place he kept things to be dealt with later, and he did the one thing Cassius Vane, for all his 7 generations of patience, had never once thought to do, because the powerful never think to do it. He asked the castle for help, not aloud, down the line. through the crown, through the heart in his hand, down the slack dying thread that still barely connected the stone to the wound, to the deep root, to the first hall, to the woven roof, to the old dead castellan who had taught a barefoot child to be the most powerful thing in the room and let no one know it. Edric, Harry sent down the thread into the dark. I'm at the stone. He's got the heart choice. He's killing people to make me poor. I don't know what to do. Tell me what to do. And the answer came back up the thread, faint and far and fierce, the way a fire answers across a great cold dark, and it was not Edric's voice alone. It was the cord, it was the four. It was the whole woven weight of the oldest house in Britain, reaching up the dying thread that the thief had built, turning the thief's own road into the road of its answer, and what it sent its heir was not a spell and not a weapon. It was a single understanding, vast and old and simple, and it arrived in Harry whole, the way the first light had arrived in him in the first hall the night they crowned him. A tap pours out air, but the one who came to keep can also call in. He has built you a road to drain you. Roads run both ways, do not pour, gather. Harry understood. He sat up. The dozen threads of cold nothing wavered in the dark. Cassius Vane watched him, patient, certain, waiting for the child to weep, or to bargain, or to break, the three things children did, the three things 7 generations of Vanes had built their whole cold house upon. Harry did none of them. He got to his feet, swaying, his arms aching, the heart of Hogwarts, grey gold and burning in his hand, and he walked toward the stone, and Vane's ruined face lit with the first true warmth Harry had seen in it, the warmth of a thief watching the vault swing open, and he said, soft and eager, yes, yes, child, bring it to the stone. Lay the heart upon the stone and pour, and they will all live. You drink the castle through this thread, Harry said. He was at the stone now, close enough to feel the cold of it, the bloated wrongness of 200 stolen years. Drop by drop, for 200 years. You drank the deep magic up the thread into the stone, and the stone made your family strange and long-lived, and you waited. He looked up at Cassius Vane, and he let Vane see, for the first time, what was at the bottom of him, which was not fear and not a child, but the thing the four had crowned. You built a road, Mr. Vane. From my castle to your stone, 200 years building it, and you never once asked yourself the question I'd ask about any road, the first question, the only question that matters. He raised the heart of Hogwarts over the swollen stone, and the crown blazed on the back of his hand, and far below, 1,000 miles south, the deep root of the castle woke and turned its whole vast attention north up the thread its enemy had built. Which way does it go? And Harry did not pour, he gathered. He laid the heart of Hogwarts against the tithe stone, the true heart against the false, and through the crown, through the door at the bottom of him that would never close, he reached down the thread of cold nothing with the whole gathered authority of the Founder's deepest binding, and he called the stolen magic home. The tower screamed. It was not the heart that screamed, and it was not Harry. It was the stone, the swollen stone, 200 years of drinking, as the road it had drunk along reversed in a single instant and became the road by which it was drained. The grey gold light poured out of the tithe stone the way water pours when a dam breaks, all of it, 2 centuries of stolen castle, racing back down the thread, but it did not run south to the empty husk in the founding stone. It ran into the heart. It ran into the true heart of Hogwarts, held in the hand of its true heir, because the heart was the thing all that stolen magic had been cut from, 1,000 years ago, and magic, like blood, like water, like a child, knows its own way home, and the heart of Hogwarts opened in Harry's hand and drank back, all at once, everything the Vanes had stolen across 7 generations, and grew warm, and grew bright, and grew whole. It did not stop there. The light came home and kept coming, 200 years of it, a flood of grey gold pouring up the thread and into the small hand at the center of the tower, and Harry stood in the heart of it with the heart of Hogwarts blazing in his fist, and felt the whole stolen weight of the castle pass through him on its way home, not into him, through him, the way a river passes through the narrow place in a valley without stopping to ask the valley's leave. And for one endless ringing moment he was the narrow place all the deep magic in Britain was rushing through, and it should have torn him apart. A 6-year-old made the gate of 1,000 years, and it did not, because the magic knew its heir, because it had been waiting for exactly this hand, because a thing does not break the door it has spent 1,000 years longing to come home through. The black stone of the tower lit grey gold from the inside. The thread of cold nothing drained empty, frayed and snapped and curled away into ash. And the husk on the iron stand, the stone the Vanes had fed for 7 generations, sat dead and dark and worthless at the center of the brightest light it had ever failed to drink. And Cassius Vane began to die. He did not die the way men in stories die. He died the way a thing dies that has been kept alive past its season by a theft, when the theft is at last repaid. The stolen magic had made the Vanes long-lived. Cassius Vane had drunk of it his whole life, and his father before him, 7 generations deep, and now it left him, all at once, called home, and the years it had been holding back came due in a single moment. The tall grey man folded inward. The lines of his ruined face deepened and ran, and the bloodless skin went to paper, and the long hands that had lain so patient on the iron stand for one terrible night curled and thinned and spotted. And Cassius Vane aged 200 years in the time it takes a candle to gutter, and what slumped at last against the black wall of the tower was very old, and very small, and breathing still, barely. The last frail remnant of a house that had built its whole long patience on a road it never thought to walk the other way. The dozen threads of cold nothing winked out. Along the black wall the bound people stirred and groaned and woke, gray-faced but living, the stone no longer drinking them because the stone was empty now, a husk, a wedge of dead gray rock on a stand of black iron, drained of 200 years in a single breath. And Harry stood in the center of the tower with the heart of Hogwarts blazing whole and warm in his hand, full at last, healed at last, and the crown on the back of his hand sang, and 1,000 miles south the deep root of the castle, which had been dying an hour ago, drank back its own heart's strength up the thread and steadied, and the ragged, failing heartbeat of the foundation slowed and deepened and grew strong. It was over. Harry understood that it was over in the ringing quiet of the tower, with the empty stone before him and the withered thief slumped against the wall and the dozen freed people stirring in the dark. He had done the thing the four left for the one who would come. He had let the thief have the husk and carried the heart out, and when the thief tried to pour him into a stone, the one who came to keep had gathered instead and called a stolen castle home. He was also 6 and very tired and 1,000 miles from anywhere in a tower he did not know, and his legs chose that moment to stop agreeing to hold him, and he sat down hard on the cold black stone with the heart of Hogwarts warm in his lap, and that was how they found him, the two who came up the tower stairs a moment later, who had been racing north since a child fainted in a courtroom and was carried out a side door by men dressed as healers. The goblin in the slate cloak who had broken Vane Hall's outer wards from the gate with a writ of distraint and a key 700 years unused, and behind him, robes the color of a kingfisher, half-moon spectacles, the long white beard, the kind and terrible face gone, for once entirely without its twinkle. Scarnock reached Harry first. The old goblin crossed the tower in 3 strides and went down on one knee before the child on the cold stone, which no goblin had done before a wizard in 700 years. And he looked at the empty stone and the withered thief and the freed people and the heart of Hogwarts whole and warm in a 6-year-old's lap, and he understood the whole of it in a single cold flat goblin glance, as he understood Ledger's, and what he said was not "Are you hurt?" and was not "You are safe now." What he said was the truest thing in the bank's whole vocabulary, the thing a goblin says only once or twice in 400 years. "The trust is kept," said Scarnock, and bowed his gray head to the air of Hogwarts, "and the bank is honored to have kept it." Albus Dumbledore stood in the doorway of the tower for a long moment and did not come in. He looked at the room, at all of it, with the eyes of a man reading a page he had been certain he already knew the ending of, and his face did a slow and complicated thing, and when he finally crossed the floor it was not toward Harry but toward the withered thing slumped against the wall, and he crouched there and looked into the ruined ancient face of Cassius Vane, and something passed between the oldest living wizard in Britain and the dying last Vane that Harry could not read. 2 old men who had spent their lives building long, careful plans for the good of the world as they saw it, and only one of whom had been stopped. Then Dumbledore rose and came to Harry and crouched down in front of him as he had crouched in the garden at Privet Drive a lifetime ago, with the same warmth, the same twinkle returning to the half-moon eyes, the same gentle current beginning already to find its way around the new shape of the world. "Harry," he said softly, "what you have done here tonight, I have lived a very long time and studied the deep magic of that castle for 50 years, and I could not have done what you did tonight. No one living could have. You have saved Hogwarts, and you have saved these people, and you have ended a theft that began before your grandparents were born, and you did it at 6 years old with no training and no wand and no one to help you but a bank and a portrait and your own remarkable mind." The warmth deepened. "And you cannot possibly understand yet how dangerous that makes you, or how badly the world will want to use you, or how much you are going to need someone wise and patient and powerful to stand between you and all the hands that will reach for you now. Someone who can teach you, someone who can keep you safe, properly safe, in a fortress no Vane could ever breach. Come with me, Harry, let me take you home, let me look after you. You have done enough, let an old man carry the weight a while." And it was the kindest offer in the world, and it was a trap, the same trap as the garden, the current that would carry him gently wherever it had already decided to go, and Harry was so tired, and the heart was so warm in his lap, and part of him, the cupboard part, wanted so badly to let someone wise and powerful pick up the weight. He looked at the old wizard's kind and terrible face. And then he looked deliberately at Scarnock, kneeling gray and patient at his side, and at the empty stone and the withered thief, and he thought about the question the castle had asked him the very first night in the first hall, with his wet knees and his cupboard and his blank square birthday. "When you come to a house that is not yours and its masters are gone, do you come to take or to keep?" And he understood that there was a third person in this tower who had spent a long life coming, very gently, very kindly, and always for the very best of reasons, to keep things that were not his. "No, thank you, Professor," Harry said. The twinkle did not waver, but something behind it went very still. "You came for me," Harry said, "and I'm glad you came because you helped Scarnock get through the gate and that mattered, but you didn't come for my birthday, not once in 6 years." You knew where I was in the cupboard with the blank square, and you left me there, because a weapon kept in nowhere stays sharp and stays hidden and stays yours for when you need it. He had heard the word weeks ago down the line. He had not understood it then. He understood it now. You don't want to keep me safe. You want to keep me, same as him. He nodded at the withered thing against the wall, and then, because it was true and the truth was the only tool he had ever been allowed to keep, he softened it because Edric had taught him that too. You're kinder than him, you'd be gentle, you'd teach me good things and you mean every kindness, but it would still be a tower, just a nicer one. He closed his hand around the heart of Hogwarts. I've lived in a cupboard. I know the difference between a place that keeps you safe and a place that just keeps you. I'm not going to live in another one, even a kind one, even yours. For a long moment Albus Dumbledore looked at the child sitting on the cold stone of a thief's tower with the heart of the oldest school in Britain warm in his lap, and the whole vast machinery of his 100-year design turned and turned behind the half-moon spectacles, looking for the gentle current around this, as it had found a way around everything, every minister and dark lord and inconvenient truth, in a long life of being right. And then slowly the old wizard did a thing Harry had not expected, which was that he stopped looking. The machinery behind the spectacles went quiet, and what looked out of the kind and terrible old face at the last was something simpler and wearier and more human than all his careful kindness, the look of a man who has met, at the very end of a long life of moving people gently into their proper places, one small person he is not going to be able to move. Oh, Dumbledore agreed quietly. No, I don't suppose you are. He was silent a moment. Your mother had that, the thing in you that I cannot find the way around. I spent a great deal of her short life being certain I knew best, and she spent a great deal of it proving, gently and immovably, that knowing best is not the same as being right. I did not learn it from her. I was too old and too sure even then. The ghost of the twinkle returned, and it was sadder and truer than the bright one. Perhaps I shall learn it from her son. Stranger things have happened. One of them is sitting in front of me. He rose, his knees cracking, an old man in a cold tower. Very well, Harry Potter, not a tower. What then? You cannot go back to the cupboard, and you will not come to the fortress, and you are 6 years old, and every hungry hand in Britain now knows your name. The world does not leave children like you alone, so what do you keep if not by being kept? And it was Scarnock who answered, rising gray and exact at Harry's side, with the cold, flat certainty of an institution that had been waiting 700 years for exactly this conversation. He keeps himself, said the keeper of dormant accounts, and the bank keeps his interest, which is not the same as keeping him, and is the whole of the difference. The heir is a ward of magical law in the first degree, and his inheritance is bound to Hogwarts, and the bank is the named trustee of that inheritance by 700 years of precedent the Wisengamot will not dare overturn, particularly not now, particularly not when the alternative on offer was a tower of bound and dying people and a thief who kidnapped the heir from your own courtroom under your own noses. The gray eyes were level on Dumbledore, and there was no deference in them, only the bottomless confidence of paper. The bank will see the child housed where he chooses, with people of his choosing, guarded by wards of our making and yours both, free to come and go, free to learn, free to refuse. The bank will stand between him and every hand that reaches, your own included, headmaster, with the full weight of the oldest law in this country. And in 5 years, when he is of age to come to your school, he will come to it as what he is, which is its heir, and sit in its oldest chair, and you will teach him gladly and keep your hands where he can see them. The thin gray smile, too many teeth, not unkind. That is what the bank keeps, not the child's freedom to keep himself. It is the only thing worth a trust. Dumbledore looked at the goblin and at the child and at the heart of Hogwarts, and something in the old shoulders settled, the settling of a man laying down, after 100 years, a weight he had been certain only he could carry, and finding the world did not fall. Then the bank keeps it, he said, and the school will wait, and I will keep my hands where he can see them. The true twinkle, the sad one. I have made many plans in my life, Harry, for the good of the world as I understood it, and I have been right about a great many of them, and I have done harm with the rest, and I have only just begun at the very end to learn the difference. You taught me one tonight that I should have learned from your mother. Thank you for that. It is not a small thing to teach an old man he was wrong and leave him grateful for it. He inclined his head, the bow of a king, to a smaller and stranger king. Welcome to the world that knows your name, heir of Hogwarts. Try to keep it kinder than the one I built. They did not take Harry back to the cupboard. The arrangement that the bank made in the weeks that followed was complicated and full of paper, and Harry understood most of it and trusted Scarnock with the rest, and the shape of it was this: that the Dursleys were relieved of a charge they had never wanted and would never miss, quietly and without scandal. That a house was found, an old stone house with a warm kitchen and a garden and no cupboards under any of its stairs, kept by a wizarding family the bank had vetted to the 7th degree, who knew what Harry was and had been chosen because they did not care, who wanted only a child to feed and a garden to dig, and who marked on the calendar in the kitchen, in red felt tip, the 31st of July. That the heir of Hogwarts came and went as he pleased, learned what he wished, and answered to no one but the trust in his own counsel, and that down the line, every night he chose to go, an old dead castellan in a woven roof of 10,000 threads of grey gold light waited to teach him, and would go on waiting for as long as it took, because they had 1,000 years of patience and a master at last to spend it on. Cassius Vane did not die. He lived, withered and ancient and emptied, in a ward of St. Mungo's, the last of a house that had drunk a castle for 200 years and been made in a single night to give it all back, and the Wisengamot, presented by the bank with a tower full of bound witnesses and a kidnapped heir, stripped the vain name of everything it had, and the empty stone was carried down to the deepest vault of Gringotts and locked away beside the husk, 2 dead rocks, a thief's whole long patience reduced to ledger entries. Which Scarnock found, he admitted, deeply satisfying, and the wound in the founding stone closed. It took time. Harry went down the line the night the heart came home, and Edric took him to the deep root, and the founding stone, which had been bleeding light an hour before, had gone quiet, the cracks no longer spreading, the cold nothing gone out of them, because the thing that had been drinking was empty and dead. The cracks were still there, 1,000 years of slow grey damage, and Harry stood over the founding stone with the heart of Hogwarts warm in his hand and did not know how to mend it, and it was Edric in the end who told him, in the dry, gentle voice of a thing that had guarded a wound for 200 years and could at last help close it. You do not mend it with the heart, lad. The heart is not a tool. The four wrote it on the plinth, and you read it, and you have not understood it yet, but you will. The old painted voice was warm. A house is not its walls. A house is the fire someone keeps in it. The founding stone does not need to be made new. Stone is only stone. It needs someone to keep the fire in it, the way Helga kept her hearth 1,000 years against a frightened child who might one day come home cold. That is all the deep magic ever was, Harry, not power, keeping. You have the heart, so keep it. Come down the line and stand in the root, and let the castle know its heir is here and is not leaving every night for years, until the keeping fills the cracks the way water fills a print in sand, slow and sure, and from the inside. That is the cure. That is the only cure there has ever been for anything. It is not a spell. It is just staying. So Harry stayed. He was 6 and then he was 7, and the years before Hogwarts unspooled, and in the waking world he dug the garden of the warm stone house and learned his letters and grew, slowly, into a boy with a home and a birthday marked in red, who was, to every ordinary eye, only a quiet, watchful, unusually kind child that good things, for once, happened to. The family that kept the house did not pry, which was the kindest thing about them. They let him be strange in his own time and fed him too much, and taught him to ride a bicycle and to tell a weed from a seedling. And on the 31st of July there was a cake, a real one, with his name on it and icing that the woman of the house had piped herself and got slightly wrong. And Harry had looked at his own name spelled out in wonky blue sugar for a long time before he ate it. Longer than the cake deserved, because a name on a cake was the exact opposite of a blank square on a calendar. And he had waited his whole life to learn the difference and found it was only sugar after all, and that the smallness of it was the whole of the point. And down the line every night he chose, he went into the heart of the oldest house in the magical world and stood in the deep root over the founding stone and kept the fire, and the cracks closed slow and sure from the inside one night at a time, and the woven roof grew a half-degree brighter for each year he came. And the heartbeat of the foundation, which had stumbled and bled and nearly stopped, grew deep and strong and patient, the heartbeat of a thing that knows, at last, after 1,000 years, that it is kept. And somewhere to the north, in a tower in Scotland, a great many small silver instruments stood on a great many spindle-legged tables, and did the patient nothing of machines that watch a thing at rest, and the old grey gold instrument on the highest shelf, which had rung one clear note for 1,000 years of waiting and then 1,000 notes of alarm, sat quiet now, turning slow and easy on its base, ringing nothing, because the thing it had been built to watch for had come and been crowned, and kept the house, and the watching was done. And in the deepest places of the castle the blades hung waiting in their keep, and the books waited on their ladders, and the bones slept in their black water, and Helga's fire burned warm and low in the great empty kitchen, no longer empty, no longer only on the chance that a child might come, but because the child had come and gone home cold no more, and would come in 5 years in the flesh up the long drive in the autumn dark with 1,000 others, and not one of them would know, and he would not tell them. That the castle they were sorted into already had a master, and that he had measured it twice because the first time felt like a guess, and that he had decided with his wet knees in the very first hour that of all the things in all the world a person might come to a great old house to do, he had come to keep it. The castle would wait, it was good at waiting, and it had at last, after 1,000 years, someone worth the wait and a fire worth the keeping and a master coming home. Chapter 7 end.